across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tuesday morning, hello, this is Duncan Barks in for Julia Hartley-Brewer here at Talk, the home of common sense. Good to have you along this morning. Thank you to Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning from 6 o'clock. The number you need, 0344 499 1000. There's a ton of stuff going on here, and we're going to pick it over this morning here on the home of common sense, which is Talk, 0344 499 1000. For your calls, your WhatsApps, and also your voice notes, we will play your voice notes out. Since you and I last spoke, we have discovered a couple of things. We have discovered that, well, we broke this story yesterday morning here on Talk, that counter-terrorism police are now investigating the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. We broke that news story yesterday morning here on the home of common sense, which of course is Talk. We also know that the security concerns of Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, are being taken seriously by our Home Secretary. There was an exchange in the chamber of the House of Commons yesterday, and he's going to meet an organisation who are heavily involved in dealing with security for MPs. I'm going to revisit a little bit of the chat we had yesterday morning because I think it's genuine. Things have moved on since we last chewed it over. And it's simply this: what more can be done to protect our politicians? I don't want to be too gruesome about this, but Joe Cox, 2016, Labour MP, murdered. Sir David Amos, 2021, Conservative MP, murdered. And it appears at the moment, when we look at what's happening with Anne Widdecombe, and we're told by detectives and sources close to detectives, they've discovered material suggesting that political ideology could be a factor in the motive. We need to have a conversation about this. 0344 499 1000. We can't afford to have any other politicians in this country targeted in such a way. At least I don't think so. And things have shifted. They have shifted. We spoke a little bit yesterday about social media and how that plays a part. Let me just bring you a story that's in today's Times newspaper. And it's a picture of an effigy at Hackney Town Hall in East London. The effigy is of the man who's going to be our next Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. And this story and this picture is genuinely frightening. Green Party councillors attended a transgender rights rally where some protesters repeatedly stabbed darts into an effigy of Andy Burnham. This was outside Hackney Town Hall, and the demo called on the council to refuse to implement the guidance on single-sex spaces. Activists have been filmed, this is verified, there are pictures in today's Times, filmed stabbing darts into the head and eye of an effigy of Burnham, who has backed the Supreme Court's ruling on the legal definition of sex and the Equality and Human Rights Commission's guidance on single-sex spaces. Now, you might be listening to this and watching this thinking, well, what's the big deal? If we normalise this kind of behaviour, then this is part of the problem that we're seeing over the last several years in this country of MPs being murdered. So let's do something about it. Question is what? 0344 499 1000. What more can be done to protect our politicians? Your thoughts on that this morning. And something else that literally, you know, sometimes you see stuff on social media. I don't know about you, but I see stuff and I have to watch it a couple of times. And then I think, is this a spoof? Is this AI? Is this someone just mucking around? But no, this is verified because it is on the Attorney General's Instagram feed. And we're talking about Lord Richard Hermer. He's the Attorney General. Some people in the past have called him a lawyer activist. I couldn't possibly comment. He has posted something on Instagram regarding the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, you will know that Reform UK and the Conservative Party made it very clear they think we need to leave, come out and not even sign up anymore to the ECHR. Kemi Badenoch's made that point, Nigel Farage has made that point, and they see it as an integral way of ensuring that we can deport people out of this country without someone going, oh no, Article 3, Article 8, right to a human life, can't go back to that country because I might be tortured. Their solution, the politicians I've just mentioned, is to basically unsign to the ECHR. And I think it's fair to say a lot of viewers and listeners to Talk probably think that is the answer. I think it's the answer. I think the ECHR leaves us hamstrung. And I think we need to come out of it, quite frankly. So Richard Hermer, the man who advises the government on legal matters, the Attorney General, is a big supporter of the ECHR. I'm about to play you something that appears on his Instagram feed. You can watch it as well if you're streaming us live. You can listen to what he had to say. He's basically taking the mick out of anyone who might want to quit the ECHR.
Attorney General, if the pen lands in the pot, we leave the ECHR.
Really? All right. Oops. So, 3 reasons I'm really glad I missed. Firstly, I believe that government protects people's rights. It doesn't take them away from them. Secondly, the rights in the ECHR are our rights. They're fundamental rights. They're your and our human rights. And thirdly, you know what? I think the world's a better place when we come together with 45 other nations across Europe, united in our shared values.
What the hell is going on? This man is the Attorney General. This man advises the government on legal matters. Now, we know, if you look at his history, he's been a supporter of the Labour Party for many, many years. If you didn't see the footage and you only heard it, obviously what happened there, when he tries to throw the pen into the glass, into the pot, he misses. He intentionally misses. It goes to the other side of the room. And then he backs up about why he thinks the ECHR is a really, really good thing. I mean, this is like watching some kind of student politician. It's embarrassing. I don't think I can say any more on the matter, because apparently his office is quite, well, quite serious, a little bit robust. I don't really want the inbox of some of my colleagues here at Talk to be filled up with complaints. So let me ask you, what do you make of what you've just seen and what you've just heard? Your reaction to Lord Hermer's Instagram video mocking, because I think that's a fair word to use, mocking leaving the ECHR. Is that suitable behaviour for someone in such a vital position, advising the government on legal matters? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp messages and your voice notes. Text the word talk and your comments to 87222. Well, can we play it one more time? Is that all right? Just so everyone's clear about the behaviour of our Attorney General, mocking those who think we should leave the ECHR. This is genuine, it's bona fide, it's on his Instagram. Here we go.
Attorney General, if the pen lands in the pot, we leave the ECHR.
Really? All right. Oops. So, 3 reasons I'm really glad I missed. Firstly, I believe that government protects people's rights. It doesn't take them away from them. Secondly, the rights in the ECHR are our rights. They're fundamental rights. They're your and our human rights. And thirdly, you know what? I think the world's a better place when we come together with 45 other nations across Europe, united in our shared values.
Your reaction to what you've seen and heard here on Talk this morning, 0344 499 1000. In the Talk studio with me for the next hour or so is investigative journalist David Shipley. Hello, David.
Hi.
Good to see you. Thank you for coming in. Well, let me get your reaction to that. What do you make of it? That's our Attorney General.
Other international legislation, but there are good arguments you could make in favour of ECHR.
Yeah.
He deployed none of those. It was also surface level. It's, oh, hey, rights are great, and they're your rights and they're my rights, and isn't it great when we all come together with lots of other people with rights? Yeah. It's just, there's nothing there. It's candy floss. And, you know, I think Lord Hermer is a more substantive man than that. I disagree with him on almost everything, but I think he has more substance. So to make this very silly, quite embarrassing video, I think reveals that he has poor judgment as a politician.
I think you're right, and he's not here to defend himself, but I mean, I used the term mocking a few moments ago. I think it's fair to say he is mocking people with this kind of, oh, I missed the pot with my pen. What a shame. He's mocking people who believe there should be a serious debate about the UK coming out of the ECHR, but you think he's ill-advised. There should have been someone in his team who just went, do you know what, boss? Probably not the greatest idea.
You would have hoped so. Yeah. But also I think it maybe reveals a little bit of how he and his team think about the British public and what they think of the level of argument which the British public expect.
Yeah. And, I mean, what struck me about it as well, and I have a bee in my bonnet about this, mostly driven by Andy Burnham, who at the moment is all over social media, particularly X, doing little videos. I mean, this is a man who's about to be Prime Minister as of Monday. We don't know what he stands for. Because he hasn't told anyone. He's not really had any real scrutiny. I mean, last night he was doing an online hustings with Labour MPs for an hour. I mean, there are over 400 Labour MPs, the best will in the world. He's only going to get through, what, 50, 55 questions? And that's if he speaks quickly, on the basis that every question and answer is about a minute. We don't know what he stands for. We have these little videos that pop up of him, you know, saying, well, this is what I think, or I'm doing this today, or I've just got off a train from Manchester, or whatever. And I only mention that because he's about to be our next Prime Minister, but it kind of links in with the Lord Hermer stuff that I don't think we should have our politicians doing these kinds of videos. I just think increasingly they're embarrassing. It's almost like they're trying to outdo each other with a bit of slapstick.
Yeah, I think so. It feels already like it's from another age. You know, maybe 10 years ago we kind of wanted politicians to be a bit fun and a bit playful, but actually we're in a really serious time in history now. You know, there's global threats everywhere. The economy is in the doldrums. It hasn't grown in almost 20 years. We've got a migration crisis. We've got an energy crisis coming. You know, we need serious politicians who are going to be serious and fix the country. And this kind of fluffy stuff doesn't play well. It's interesting. I met a very senior Labour figure a couple of days ago who will remain nameless, who said about Andy Burnham that, you know, he's going to realise quite quickly that fluttering his eyelashes doesn't get him very far.
No, it won't. It won't. And I do believe, I mean, I spoke to quite a few political commentators and also other MPs as well, and they give a view which is, do you know what? There will be a bounce in the polls for Labour. A small bounce, because it's someone new. It's a new broom, if you like. But very quickly, the gloss is going to disappear, and Burnham is going to have a hefty old dose of reality, because no number of dark blue or black T-shirts and fluttering your eyelashes is going to solve some of this country's increasing problems.
Yeah, and he's still got the same parliamentary party. And a big part of what did for Starmer, obviously, he was a charisma void and had all his problems as a leader, but actually he couldn't get the Parliamentary Labour Party to do what he wanted. And there's no reason to believe that Burnham's going to get them to be able to be any more sensible.
No. Yeah, and I mean, the question then becomes, you know, how patient will the Labour Party be in terms of Burnham being able to wave some kind of magic wand to turn around Labour's fortunes? And I just don't think they're particularly patient. I mean, I'm not a fan of Starmer by any stretch of the imagination, or indeed his Chancellor Rachel Reeves, but I can well see the arguments that when we talk about the markets, for example, you know, maybe we should keep them in place, because it just means financially there's an element of stability there, and the markets around the world will carry on lending us money, not using extortionate interest rates, because there is stability. Burnham comes in, and we might talk about this later, he changes his Chancellor to someone like Ed Miliband. I mean, I think the markets will go chaotic.
Yeah, absolutely. And if he brings in these sort of backing down on the ILR reforms, if he wants to spend a bit more, it's all going to really rattle markets. I think he's going to find out very quickly how parlous his situation is.
I think you're right. 0344 499 1000 if you want to pick up on the Lord Hermer mocking video that's on his Instagram. I mean, maybe I'm overreacting to this. If I am, you will let me know, but I just find it just utterly bizarre that the man who advises the government on legal matters, the Attorney General, thinks it's appropriate to post such a thing. Dave, let's turn our attention to the ongoing story that we've been covering here at Talk over the last 72 hours and a little bit longer regarding what appears to be the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. We were on air yesterday when it was announced that now Counter-terrorism police are investigating what happened to Anne Widdecombe, who I think was a great politician and a great woman, and some of the tributes that have been coming out have been utterly fantastic, and rightly so. Though I do get a little bit annoyed with people on the left going, well, I didn't like her views, but, you know, it's a shame that what happened to her. It's just, why do they find it necessary to go, well, I disagree with her views before they start sympathising with her death?
It's very odd, isn't it? I think they feel they have to disavow her before they sympathise, because otherwise they might be tainted by what they see as evil politics.
Exactly that. I find it really inappropriate. So we mentioned yesterday, we broke the news on the show about counter-terrorism police being involved in the investigation. This, despite the fact that Devon and Cornwall police initially was just like, oh, we don't think there's any political motivation or any kind of potential links. I think Devon and Cornwall police have come out of this really badly. What's your take?
Yeah, I think they haven't looked very competent, have they? I mean, certainly on Thursday evening they were, I understand, steering us all to believe that it was an interrupted burglary. That was their view. And that's supported by the fact they then went sort of arrested this local chap who they quite quickly realised wasn't involved, seemingly because they got the assumed date of at the time of Anne's death wrong by about 12 hours. So I know there's some conspiracy theories floating around online. I think this is just fundamentally a failure of competence. Right. Devon and Cornwall are just not coping very well with this murder investigation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's very easy for people to want to delve into the world of conspiracy, but I think it's most things I come across, with some exceptions, but most things, it's more cock-up, isn't it, than conspiracy?
I mean, they got form as well. A couple of years back, there was this weird situation where I think it was the there was between the PCC and the chief constable. One was saying there'd been multiple bodies found in a wood, and then the other said, "Oh no, it was just one."
Yeah.
You know, if they can get that sort of level of stuff wrong in non-political cases, that we shouldn't be surprised at how wrong they've got this. And I suspect they're probably quite glad that counter-terrorism police are now running this.
Yeah, and clearly what has happened is they've raided this guy's house, who's currently in custody, the suspect. Presumably they've gone through his mobile phone and computers and whatnot, and they've discovered there's certain material. One report, saying discovery of Russian communist literature and other items of political ideology at the home of the suspected killer. Are we surprised by this at all?
Well, it sort of depends what they mean by it, doesn't it? I mean, I have Russian communist literature at my house. I have books by Kropotkin, for example, you know, and it sort of depends. Is this something mainstream that someone who's interested in politics might have, or is this something really, are we talking Red Army gang training materials from the 70s, you know? And I think until we know more, it's very hard to judge.
It is hard to judge, and it does get us into this whole area that we mentioned at the start of the show, which is what more can be done to protect our politicians. I mentioned earlier about Joe Cox. I mentioned about Sir David Amess. We have the ongoing investigation into the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. I think we live in quite disturbing times now, predominantly fueled by social media, where people say some vile stuff that's not really challenged. And I find myself torn, because as an advocate of free speech, I do believe that people should be able to say what they want, right? And we shouldn't be putting people in prison for having views or having social media postings all over their social media. That said, we clearly have a problem in this country today with how people feel they can behave towards politicians. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, this story in the Times about people sticking darts into the face of Andy Burnham, Green Party councillors, at a rally outside Hackney Town Hall. I mean, if we don't challenge this kind of stuff, it normalises that kind of behaviour, doesn't it?
I think it does to an extent, but I think actually a lot of this is being driven by politicians. So if you go back a few months ago, Ed Davey posted a video on the Liberal Democrats' official X account, where he talked about saying, what's the greatest threat to Britain? He said, it's not Tehran, it's not Moscow.
Nigel Farage.
It's Nigel Farage's Reform Party. So that's a mainstream politician who would present himself as being a voice of moderation, a voice of unity. And actually, he's saying that another mainstream politician, the leader of the most popular party in the country, is the greatest threat to our nation. That is vastly more dangerous and, I think, inciting than someone mouthing off, some sort of account with 100 followers mouthing off.
You're brilliant, because I hadn't thought about it that way until you've just outlined it brilliantly. You're absolutely right. You've got a political leader, a leader of a political party in this country, Lib Dems, who've got, what, 72 MPs, going all over his social media, saying, you know, it's not about Russia, right? It's not about Iran. The biggest threat is another political leader. And if we let that go unchallenged, which, let's be honest, we have, apart from a few reform activists just telling Ed to do one, which you'd expect them to do, we kind of then normalise or accept the behaviour that that's OK.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually wrote about it at the time, and I went to the Liberal Democrats press desk and said, would you like to defend this?
What did they say?
They didn't reply to me.
Really?
Yeah, this was for a piece in The Spectator, you know, and they wouldn't even reply. And I think there's... it is mostly, I think, on the left and the centre-left, actually. There's this tendency to describe people they disagree with as enemies. And it's within government as well. So there was a big government paper that was published called Protecting What Matters a few months ago about national unity. And they describe in that people who believe that the English are an ethnic group, that, you know, who are highly sceptical about mass migration, as being threats to the unity of the country. You know, and that itself, I think, is really escalatory language and really dangerous language. So it's not being driven by low follower accounts that are anonymous, I think, on Twitter. It's being driven from the heart of our political class, and they need to be a bit more self-aware about it.
Brilliant. David Shipley, investigative journalist, here alongside me at Talk. It's a Tuesday morning. It's just turned 20 past 10.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk. I'm Duncan Barks. I'm here through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Ian Collins here from 1. Alongside me for the next hour, or through until 11 o'clock, is David Shipley, investigative journalist, as we chew over some of today's news stories and this slightly bizarre bit of footage that's on the Instagram feed of Lord Richard Hermer, the Attorney General, the government's legal advisor. Essentially, I mean, it call me out if you think I've got this wrong, but mocking those of us, because David and I have agreed we think we should come out of the ECHR. Kemi Badenoch thinks that's the case. Nigel Farage thinks that's the case. Not because we don't believe in human rights, but we do believe in having the ability to deport people from this country who shouldn't be here. I think that's the driving factor for most people of a sane mind. Your reaction to the Instagram video and the audio, 0344 499 1000. I'm just genuinely astounded by this. Someone who is a fan of the ECHR is Kevin in Basingstoke. Hello, Kevin.
Morning.
Morning, sir. What would you like to say?
Well, hundreds of millions of people around the world don't have any human rights. And Nigel Farage has convinced people that we should leave the ECHR, scrap the Equalities Act, a man that is funded by a convicted fraudster that offered to launder money for drug dealers.
Well, what's that got to do with human rights?
Well, I don't trust a man like him. I mean, how do we...
Well, all right, well, let's turn our attention to Kemi Badenoch, because her Conservative Party policy is to come out of the ECHR.
Well, I don't trust her either.
Why not?
Well, why should we trust? Well, like I just said, why should we trust a man that wants? I mean, she's not.
Well, hang on. You're unravelling a bit too fast here for my liking. So let's try and.
The subject. Why don't
I'm not changing the subject.
Yes,
you said I'm not. I'm asking you a question.
And you want to say, oh, what about Kemi?
Yeah.
I want to say, what about Nigel? He's the one that is taking money from a convicted fraudster, a man that wants to.
Well, you said this twice now, and my response. Hang on. My response to you was, what's that got to do with human rights? And you seem unable to answer the question.
Well, because we can't trust him. How do we know what he's going to replace him with?
OK, well, if you can't trust Nigel Farage, I then mentioned Kemi Badenoch to you, and you accuse me of changing the subject. Why can we not... I mean, it's not about trust, is it? You might not like that particular political policy, but there are people in this country who would support it.
Oh, yeah, they've been convinced that we've got to. I mean, there's loads of other... I mean, nearly every country in Europe is a member of the ECHR. They're not scrapping it.
No, but that's not a reason to remain.
Yes, it is a good reason to
Why?
because we can't trust Nigel Farage. He's a compulsive
Well, you keep saying
liar.
this is getting really boring. Come on, Kev, let's up the game a little bit, right? You believe in human rights, yeah?
Yes.
I believe in human rights, right? So we've got some common ground there. Agreed?
Yeah.
OK. How important to you are human rights?
Very important. I mean, without human rights, you've got nothing.
I agree. So why do we have to be part of the ECHR to uphold people's human rights?
Well, what are we going to replace it with? Like I said, we won't know, will we?
Why? OK, would you ever? Let me ask you.
Would you sign a mortgage deal or buy a house without knowing anything about it? You would want to know the details, wouldn't you?
Yes.
We won't know the details. We're just going to leave, and then it's up to him what he replaces it with.
Have you ever been to Canada?
Have I ever been to Canada? Why? Yeah. Why are you asking that?
Well, because I'm interested.
No, I haven't. Have you?
Okay. What about Australia?
No, but you're going to say they're not members of the ECHR, but they've got a lot. They've got regulations that are built in.
So why can't we do the same?
Well, because like I said, I mean, I don't know what Canada and Australia are like, but they haven't got Nigel Farage running the country.
Correct. So, I mean, I think we can both say we can agree on something else, can't we? That both Canada and Australia are civilized countries.
Yes, they are civilized.
Right. And they're not in the ECHR, are they?
No, but they've probably got lots of other regulations built into law.
Yeah, brilliant, and I hope they have, so we can do the same. So what's the problem, apart from the fact that you don't like anything that Nigel Farage says?
Because the man that's going to implement it is a compulsive liar, and you can't trust him.
All right, welcome your view. Thank you, Kevin. 0344 499 1000. I thought we were going round in circles a bit there.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was a particularly substantive critique of the ECHR regime. I think a lot of the problems that people don't recognise are that actually it constrains our ability to act to protect the rights of British people. You know, we're not able to deport very violent, dangerous men. You know, a very good example actually is what it's done to our military. So Article 2 protections and protection of the right to life are now treated as part of many of our military actions. Yeah. Which is ridiculous, because clearly a war zone is not like policing South Kensington, and it's actually having a hugely damaging effect on our military fighting effectiveness, particularly of our special forces. So there's lots of detail in this law, and I think the last caller was a bit like Lord Hermer in that he's just interested in the surface. Rights are good, I'd like rights. Yeah. And if we're going to talk seriously about policy, you've got to go into the detail of what does this law actually do? Is it good? If not, we need to change it.
Exactly that. Let's do some messages here, then we'll chew over some more of today's news stories. This is Rob in Cambridgeshire. Governments do take our rights away. They don't protect them, and we don't have shared values with any other country. The ECHR grants us rights. Well, who asked them? The UK has all the human rights it needs enshrined in common law. I don't share Hermer's views at all, says Rob in Cambridgeshire. Lord Hermer, says Joanna in Salisbury, is just an example of playground politics, the same as David Lammy, with inaccurate facts expecting us to swallow them. Ed Miliband's videos are quite similar. Oh, should we go and have a look at Ed's videos? See what Ed's sticking on his Insta. A few more here. You can see why him and Starmer are pals, says Brian in Durham. Gibbs says, sack the Attorney General. And David Hallett says, Duncan, we just need to be consistent on the law. If a tweet gets you 31 months, then voodoo, regardless of how silly you think it is, should be treated as a death threat, says David in Wales. I'll do a couple more here. And this is Liz in Flamborough. Is that man a muppet? Oh, hang on. Is she talking about me? Oh, she's talking about Hermer. OK. He certainly comes across as one. Why should our human rights be the same as 45 other countries? I don't consider them as the same. We should be in control of our own human rights, which affect us as Brits. I'm sick of being in Europe's club, says Liz. 0344 499 1000 for your WhatsApps. I'll read them out. We'll play your voice notes. Or you can do what our caller did and give us a shout. But I will ask you questions, because that's kind of how this thing works. David Shipley, investigative journalist, is alongside me here. Let's turn our attention to our Home Secretary, David, Shabana Mahmood, announcing a legal change in the bid to deport Rochdale grooming gang leader Shabir Ahmed. It's going to take a year to come into effect. Now, whenever we touch on stuff like this on Talk, people, rightly, viewers and listeners go, why does this stuff take so long?
It's a lack of will, because actually Parliament can do whatever it wants, and can do it very quickly when it wants to, and we've seen that in the past, you know. And here, all Parliament actually has to do is pass the Deportation of Shabir Ahmed Act 2026. Yeah. You know, say, notwithstanding any legislation, Shabir Ahmed will be deported as soon as is possible. You know, that is really simple. It could be done within a couple of days through the Commons and the Lords and then to royal assent. What actually is happening here is the Home Secretary is trying to manage her party, her parliamentary party, who are, you know, I think way softer and way to the left of people like Shabana Mahmood on migration matters. So there's a lot of fear here that in changing the law it might mean that, you know, the Windrush generation could face deportation at some point. There's all these concerns, and so she's going to move it through by creating an exceptional severity test, only for the most serious offences. But I think what's quite interesting here is that the Labour Party have now accepted the idea of stripping citizenship from people, because actually Shabir Ahmed was a British citizen, and we're now accepting, that seems to be generally accepted, that despite that we should take his citizenship away and send him to where he came from.
More calls in a few moments' time, more messages. David Shipley, investigative journalist, is here with me at Talk. It's just turned 10:30.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, just turned 10:30. I'm Duncan Barks in for Julia Hartley-Brewer here at Talk, the home of common sense. David Shipley, investigative journalist, with me through until 11 o'clock this morning as we continue to chew over some of today's news stories. Let's first of all, though, turn our attention to Red Ed, as some people call Ed Miliband, currently the Energy Secretary, hotly tipped by some to be the next Chancellor. And what appears to be quite a U-turn by my reckoning, but we'll get a view on this in a second, by Ed, is he wants to approve drilling in the North Sea to calm market jitters about his possible appointment as Chancellor and to prove that he is no net zero zealot. Joining us on Talk this morning to give us a view is Maurice Cousins, Campaign Director at Net Zero Watch. Hello.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well indeed, good to see you. Thank you for your time this morning. I can't be alone in thinking that Ed is just simply maybe abandoning his principles in order to have a proper tilt at the job he wants next.
Yes, I've always thought that he might have been using North Sea oil and gas as a bargaining chip for something else that he would really want. I mean, the reality is that the real battle for net zero is in the Treasury.
Yeah.
You know, in order for us to do this, there's lots of funding that's required and subsidies, and the Treasury historically has been a roadblock to a lot of net zero investment. So, you know, using net zero as a bargaining chip to get the actual prize that he wants, it probably makes sense.
It is quite interesting, this, isn't it, for many, many reasons. I mean, there's been a lot of lobbying in the past to say to people like Ed and indeed other Labour politicians, increasingly actually by some Labour backbenchers as well, who would rightly make the point, which is, look, you know, for the sake of our economy, we should be drilling. They also make the point that in order to try and hit our net zero targets, we import oil and gas from Norway, and they're finding the stuff in the same place that we could be drilling for it ourselves. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yes, it's totally inconsistent. I mean, net zero is a powerful drug and leads to all sorts of delusions. But you know, the fact is, Duncan, is that you know, the UK will continue to consume significant quantities of oil and gas for many decades to come. You know, even if you read, for example, the Climate Change Committee's 7th Carbon Budget, you know, they're saying that in 2050 we'll still be consuming about 19% of present level of energy demand, and that will be coming from oil and gas. I think that is wildly optimistic on their part. Ed Miliband himself has sort of consumed it. So then the question comes down to, where does that oil and gas come from? And, you know, energy sovereignty matters. Where things are made, where they're produced, counts. And in this new era of great power competition that we are currently in, having that domestic capacity to be able to produce, refine, and you know, distribute it here really matters.
I think it does. And I mean, I always find, I don't know if zealousy is such a word, but if not, I've just created it, surrounding net zero to be just utterly absurd. And as a journalist and a commentator, I always like to point the finger of blame at someone. But we can't just blame Labour with this, can we? Because the net zero stuff, by my reckoning, goes back to Theresa May, who enshrined these targets into law.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, this is a cross-party thing, but you know, look, I think this goes a lot deeper than people blaming individual parties or politicians. You know, the fact is that the British people have voted for this. Perhaps uninformed, perhaps because they've been, you know, persuaded by various spurious arguments that have said that this will make us more secure and wealthy. But the fact is that the British people have voted for this madness. I think that is downstream from the you know, the corrosive effect of the cross-party consensus and client media. But you know, I don't think that we can just simply put this at the door of individual politicians and parties. They are to blame, but I think we have to collectively take responsibility for a lot of this.
Yeah, and I mean, you make a really interesting point. I mean, do you think that people were aware of what they voted for? Because it was in previous party manifestos. I mean, or do you think it's just something people just go, oh yeah, net zero, probably a good thing?
Well, look, I think the way that net zero has often been sold as a sort of the way it's been presented to the British people is that you will essentially substitute your existing way of life for just a cleaner version of what you currently have. So, if you take, for example, something like your car, the argument will be, look, you can continue doing exactly what you want. You can go to the supermarket, drive on holiday, it doesn't really matter, drop your kids off at school. But instead of it being an internal combustion engine, it'll be an electric vehicle. Similarly, when it comes to your home, people will say, look, it doesn't really matter, Duncan. You'll be able to continue to heat the temperature you want. But all it will really be is, instead of it being a combi boiler, it will be a heat pump. Yeah. But actually, net zero isn't about that. It is a much broader program of change. It interferes and intervenes in vast swathes of our economic activity and personal activity. And those trade-offs have been deliberately obscured from the British people. And we've just not had that honest debate about trade-offs. It's all been sold as we'll be just getting to the land of milk and honey.
Yeah, and the whole debate around it reminds me of where we were 20 years ago when we started talking about immigration. I mean, I'm old enough to remember doing radio shows where there was this kind of view that if you were overtly critical of immigration to this country, you were some kind of bad person and you needed to really accept it was for the good of this nation. And I find myself thinking we're in a similar position at the moment with net zero, certainly over the last few years, which is like any criticism of net zero basically means you want to destroy the planet. And I do wonder whether or not the media is partly to blame for that, because certainly at the BBC and indeed elsewhere, there is a serious kind of obsession with net zero.
Yes, I mean, look, you're right. I mean, ultimately, what this comes down to, I think, is that we've seen a corrosion of collective reasoning in our public debate over many decades. And you're right. Net zero isn't the only issue where we've seen this. I think where you can see whole swathes of our public policy agenda where there's been state failure, whether it be immigration, whether it be defence, whether it be welfare, net zero. Yes, it's because we haven't had a free and fair debate on a lot of these things, and that's where logical fallacies are able to proliferate, and ultimately the downstream consequences of that is that Britain becomes poorer, less secure, and just a poorly governed country.
Maurice, great talking to you as always. Thank you for joining us on Talk this morning. That's Maurice Cousins, campaign director at Net Zero Watch here on Talk. It's 20 to 11. David Shipley, investigative journalist. Is Ed Miliband selling out here in order to become Chancellor?
I think he might be playing an even more clever game,
actually,
because if you think about it, if he does grant these consents, well, the last time they were granted, they were overturned. So the Tories granted the consents, then there was a judicial review brought on the basis of the legislation about emissions, and the court said, actually, you can't do this. So Ed Miliband could quite easily grant the consent and then say, oh, well, the court ruled it out, that's nothing to do with eGov, And I think that's probably what would happen, because we have this legislation about emissions, which actually... that hasn't changed since 2022, so why would the court make a different decision now?
The prospect of Ed Miliband being the next Chancellor of the United Kingdom, what would be your thoughts be around that?
I think it would be very bad. I think Rachel Reeves has been a terrible Chancellor, but Miliband would be worse. I think his instincts would be to accelerate the net zero programme, which is and has destroyed our heavy industry in this country, and that makes it impossible for us to have a functioning defence sector as well. And he is a zealot, and I think a very dangerous one. And were he handed the keys to the Treasury, I think he would accelerate the collapse of our country's financial security.
I think you're absolutely right. If you want to pick up on that, 0344 499 1000 is our number. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barks. This is Talk. We've been playing out something from the Instagram page or the feed of Lord Hermer, Lord Richard Hermer. He's the Attorney General. He is the government's legal advisor. We'll play it out again in the next hour, but it's this bizarre video he's put together, basically mocking, leaving the ECHR. I'm asking you for your thoughts on what you've seen and heard. 0344 499 1000. Matthew's in Warrington. Hello, Matthew.
Hello. Great show, Duncan. Enjoyed it so far the last 2 days, mate.
Very kind of you, sir. What would you like to say about this ECHR Hermer thing?
See, the ECHR, what everyone forgets is the ECHR was brought in after the Second World War to protect the rights of the Jewish people who were persecuted by the Nazis, the Roman gypsies, and they came over, the Polish people. And it's outdated. It's been manipulated. And it's quite ironic, really, because the Jewish people that live here now, they're the ones who are getting persecuted. But it's outdated. We should have left the ECHR when we left the Brexit. It should have been part of the deal. We're always going to have human rights in our country. The only people who've made their money out of it is Harmer and Keir Starmer. And to be fair, most people now, when you say human rights lawyers, they make your stomach turn. They're hated with a vengeance now because they're just leeches now. They're just creaming our country.
Well, certainly there is a view, Matt, isn't there, that certain lawyers are actually more activists than perhaps just lawyers. I mean, I don't know how long you've been listening this morning for. Did you hear Kevin in Basingstoke earlier?
Yes, exactly. He'll be one of them guys who's on his keyboard and he'll say, he's there, look at him putting flowers down just to make sure the cameras are there. And Anne Widdecombe was such a bad person. If I said anything about, say if that was Keir Starmer and I posted on Keir Starmer that, he deserved everything he got, I'd have the police knocking on my door.
You would, but the reason I asked you about Kevin in Basingstoke, he was adamant. I mean, clearly he had a bit of a Nigel Farage obsession, but he was adamant that we should never leave the ECHR because, quote, people need human rights. And I put to him, there are perfectly civilised countries around the world, Canada being one, Australia being another, where and I think we can all agree they're civilised countries where people do have very decent human rights, and obviously they're not part of the ECHR. So how would you convince someone like Kevin, Matthew, that actually we should leave and not be too concerned about leaving?
The likes of Kevin, you can't convince. He will always have in his mind that we need to stay left-wing. We can't give up anything. He wants to be still part of you. It doesn't matter. If you've told him the sky is blue, he'd still think it was black or red. He'll never change his mind, and that's the problem. There's too many of them now, and because you've got social media. I know everyone goes free speech, but the things that have been on social media last week or so about Anne and that, it's disgraceful, and there should be a level of cut off. Because like to Kevin, you give them a voice and they just run away with it. They won't be told that sorry, mate, we are going to have a human rights bill. If Kemi gets in or Farage gets in, we will create a law of human rights. But we should also have a human rights to have women and children feel safe at night.
Yeah.
You know, that's priority. If anyone's coming over to the country and because they've been persecuted, you shouldn't be getting on a boat and you shouldn't be throwing your passport away. And the other thing I think we should do as well, if you can afford to pay a gangmaster to get on a dinghy to come over here for £2,000, you can afford to pay your legal bills for human rights, not get legal aid. So as soon as you stop legal aid, that'll stop the human rights lawyers.
All right, Matthew in Warrington, good call. Thank you. 0344 499 1000 for yours. You want to pick up on anything Matthew said, or indeed Kevin in Basingstoke earlier. We're talking about the ECHR, Lord Hermer's video mocking those of us who believe that we should uncouple ourselves from the ECHR. Your thoughts on that? We'll continue to ask the question, given the ongoing situation in the investigation into the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. What more can be done to protect our politicians? All of that going on. 0344 499 1000. Let's turn our attention to something which I suspect, if you look at your water bills, you're going to find yourself thinking, this is just not fair. I mean, we often talk about having an equal and fair society. Tell me what you make of this. Benefit claimants have been given permission to ignore hosepipe bans. Now, we all know about the hosepipe bans. It's been blooming hot over the last several weeks. Various water companies are saying, well, no, you can't use your hosepipe anymore. There's a story in the Daily Telegraph that's talking about 2 water companies who have been accused of 2-tier policies after allowing families on welfare payments to flout the restrictions. While millions of Southern Water and Affinity Water customers have been under a ban, they can't use their hosepipe since Friday, thousands on a water-shore tariff are exempt. Just so you're fully aware of this, the national tariff caps water bills for low-income households and those who must use large amounts of water for essential needs. Those who use sprinklers or fill ponds and pools are not eligible for the tariff. Applicants must be claiming benefits. They must have 3 or more children under 19 in full-time education or have someone in their household with a medical condition that requires significant amounts of water. Is this fair and just, or is it just another example of 2-tier Britain? Let's get a view on this. Jamie Jenkins is a former ONS statistician. Hello, Jamie.
Good morning, mate. You all good?
I think we're all good. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this story. What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I think the public are rightly going to get fed up when you've got this kind of 2-tier kind of system with water. I think the first thing on water, why are we having a hosepipe ban is the first thing, is that we've had decades and decades of the population growing and we haven't basically factored in the infrastructure to factor that in. So hosepipe bans are pretty much just demand management. So if we need to demand manage overall, well, why do some groups of people allowed to have the hosepipe and some who are not? Now, if you've got those medical needs for whatever reason for needing a hosepipe, of course, but I think some of the exemptions you were talking about there, Duncan, was about just having 3 children under the age of 19. So why should one family be able to use a hosepipe and then another one not? Are you going to have families taking their cars around to their mate's house to go and wash the car? It's absolutely bonkers.
It is bonkers, and I think it just feeds into this narrative that some people believe is the case in this country. And we often talk about it here on Talk. We talk about 2-tier policing and 2-tier justice. I don't quite know what you describe this as, but it certainly seems to be some kind of 2-tier policy. And you know, I'm not here to bash people on benefits, but equally, I think if you're paying vast amounts of money for your water to be supplied and being taken away, if you're going to have a hosepipe ban, it needs to apply right across the board, doesn't it?
Of course, yeah, because ultimately the reason there's a hosepipe ban is the water companies are saying we may run out of water in the reservoirs. When you think, you know, it's difficult when we're in the middle of a heat wave. If you think back to the winter, the amount of rain that we were having across the country, we clearly should be collecting more and more of that rain during the winter months to support us during the summer months. But I think it's pretty much, the public are right to get fed up. That I think they're getting fed up that people are, well, you've got one group of people who are paying into the system and another group of people who are taking out for the system, and you're continuing with these 2-tier policies that are going on. It's unjust. It's not fair. And I think, you know, these water companies need to read the room, I think, on it.
I think you're right. I mean, if you work for a water company at the moment, I mean, you can't do right for doing wrong, can you? For all kinds of reasons. Because, I mean, even I, as someone who is you'd probably describe as an old school conservative who is you know, not necessarily, I'm not anti-privatisation. I would struggle to defend and make the argument that privatisation of the water industry has been a success given some of the stuff that we're seeing. Let's just bring in David Shipley, who's in the studio here at Talk, investigative journalist. What's your take on this, David? Is this just another example of 2-tier Britain?
Well, I think in part, yeah, there's a few layers that's on there. So this reminds me a bit of the way that a lot of public attractions and zoos and this sort of thing will offer discounted tickets to people on benefits and, you know, asylum seekers and this sort of thing. And that might sound lovely, but actually what that means is people who aren't on benefits, taxpayers, are subsidising those tickets. And here I struggle to understand what medical condition could require a hosepipe to water your garden with. I can understand maybe some people have to use a bath inside, but I don't really understand that. I think and we saw something similar recently. The government's treading this idea that unemployed people on benefits might also get free childcare, which again seems a very peculiar approach.
I mean, let me just challenge you. I mean, I agree with you, but just for the sake of robust debate, I mean, is it not a symbol of a caring, sharing society that those of us who, you know, are doing all right in life make some sacrifices for those who need some help?
I think
I can't believe I said that.
Well, I mean, I think it's an argument. This is the argument that's made. And I think much the problem in British society is that we bring in again and again and again these individually quite small changes which seem nice, you know, this. Oh, it's just nice to help people. It's nice.
It's nice.
And we've got to the point now, you've got to remember, we haven't had any meaningful economic growth per capita in almost 20 years. We have a really high cost of living, a very high tax burden, and at no point does anyone seem to consider what the second-order effects of this might be.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, the biggest issue here, right, the reason this is a problem is because we haven't built any reservoirs since the 1990s.
Yeah.
And we actually closed one in Wales a few years ago.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was thinking when I was talking to Jamie there, and Jamie, I was going to put it to you, but I wasn't entirely sure of my facts. I had in the back of my mind that we haven't built a reservoir for decades, and surely this is part of the problem, right?
Yeah, well, the population's gone up quite a lot since the 1990s. There are plans in place, I think, in the last couple of years. There's been a lot of kind of media talk about the lack of reservoirs because hosepipe bans are quite common now during the summer months.
Yeah.
Some of them go on into the winter months as well because of the lack of water supply and things. So the fact we haven't had them for so many years is a critical problem in the infrastructure. So rather than let's ban and stop people using them, just get more infrastructure. And they take time to build, but you can't expect millions to come into the country. Water usage is going to go up. You know, heat waves last for days, sometimes weeks. For infrastructure and the failure to plan for that, it lasts for years, and that's the problem that we've got, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to let you go, Jamie. Thank you, though, for your expertise. Jamie Jenkins, former ONS statistician. I mean, it seems to me this is a dereliction of duty, right? I'm not hanging it on this government, but previous governments, successive governments. You know, you have more people living in the country. You don't need to be Einstein to work out you probably need more water reservoirs, and nothing has been built since, I think it was 1992. Let me put a question to you regarding this. Should benefits claimants be allowed to ignore the hosepipe ban when everyone else faces a £1,000 fine? Is it yet another example of two-tier Britain? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. David, before you go, very quickly, you've done a cracking bit of work here, which has appeared in the Spectator and indeed elsewhere. A great bit of journalism. 4 companies are approved by the Home Office to sponsor worker visas despite being under UK sanctions for their links to the Russian and Iranian regimes. What's going on?
Yeah, this is an astonishing thing. And so the Foreign Office maintains a list of companies which it has sanctioned because it believes they're linked to hostile state activity usually. So you've got Russian entities that have been sanctioned since the Ukraine war began, and we've got Iranian entities that have been sanctioned often because they're believed to be linked to the Iranian nuclear program. Okay. And at the same time, the Home Office allows certain organisations to sponsor workers to come here. Right. And what is apparently the case is those systems don't really seem to speak to each other, because at least 4 sanctioned entities are still approved to sponsor visas, and the Home Office gives them its highest rating for compliance, A.
Wow. So how did you come across this?
Well, so this is actually sitting there in a couple of publicly available databases. So the sanctions list is public, and the Home Office publishes a huge list of all the organisations which are approved to sponsor visas. And there's lots of strange ones on there. There's tiny food delivery companies in the middle of nowhere. There's hand car washes. There's companies you wouldn't expect to require to import lots of skilled workers. And what we discovered was there are sanctioned entities as well. And it's an astonishing failure of government.
Have the Home Office reacted to this at all?
Yes, they did come back and said that they were sure that none of those organisations had actually sponsored any new people since the sanctions were brought in. We weren't able to get any clarity on whether the people they'd previously sponsored were still in the country. And there always seems to be this lack of information. Like these different government departments don't really seem to speak to each other or really understand what's going on.
Are they, do you think, deliberately fudging stuff? I ask that question because you're an investigative journalist. You might put in freedom of information requests. You might talk to people, try and get statements out of government departments and stuff. I mean, I'm not asking these questions just to bash the current government, because I'm also wise enough and been around the houses enough to know that it's right across the political spectrum. But I mean, do you sometimes feel with your work that there are obstacles put in the way?
Oh, absolutely. And I think particularly when you're doing freedom of information requests. It's also very varied by departments. The Home Office and the Ministry of Justice can be very painfully slow and quite obstructive. At one point, a Home Office civil servant came back to me asking what I meant by the fiscal year. And they wanted me to clarify that before they could process it, which I felt was a little bit...
That sounds like a delaying tactic.
Indeed, but the MOD are actually really good. They seem to come back in a very thorough way. You can see they're trying to disclose as much as they can within the law. So I think it's more of a civil servant issue, and particularly some departments are very obstructive.
Yes, I think they're probably programmed to be as obstructive as possible. And before I let you go, what else are you working on at the moment?
I'm working on...
If you can tell us.
I'm working on something quite interesting about sort of corruption in the prison service, which I hope will bear fruit soon, and something about sort of the military environment and what that looks like under the legal conditions we currently have.
Look forward to hearing about it. Look forward to reading about it. Thank you. David Shipley, investigative journalist here on Talk. I'm Duncan Barks. I'm here through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Ian Collins here from 1. Keep your messages and calls coming in. What more can be done to protect our politicians? We're obviously revisiting that particular issue given the ongoing investigation into the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. Also, what's your reaction to Lord Hermer's Instagram video mocking leaving the ECHR? Should we play that again after 11? We can do that after 11, can't we? And also, benefits claimants, should they be allowed to ignore the hosepipe ban when everyone else faces a £1,000 fine? 0344 499 1000. Let me know your thoughts. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barks. This is Talk, the home of common sense on a Tuesday morning. 0344 499 1000. That number is so important because you can call me, we can have a chat. You can also WhatsApp me your thoughts, and you can send voice notes to that number and we will play them out, because I think there are a number of things we need to get sorted this morning here on Talk. And as the investigation continues into the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe, I think once again we need to have the conversation about what more can be done to protect our politicians. And I don't want to sound gruesome about it, but you can go back over time. You can talk about Sir David Amess, who was MP for Southend, who was murdered in 2021. Jo Cox, who was murdered in 2016. She was the Labour MP for Batley and Spen. And also where we find ourselves this morning with the investigation regarding the death of Anne Widdecombe. We did this show yesterday, and I was struck by some people who are just like, it's not MPs who need security, it's us who need security as a result of MPs' decisions. And I was ruminating about that last night in the pub, because I walked the dog, have a couple of pints of Guinness and go home. And I thought that was astounding, that some people are quite happy to put at risk the lives of politicians in this country with this kind of fudge idea that it's like it's us that need security, not MPs. I mean, I made the point yesterday to a caller, which is, well, we can do both, can't we? So I'm keen to take the nation's temperature on that. 0344 499 1000. We also have this slightly bizarre story, I think it is bizarre, about benefits claimants who are being allowed to ignore the hosepipe ban. And just for the record, it's not about bashing people on benefits. There are people on benefits for very, very good reasons. But whenever I read stories like this, I do find myself thinking there's a danger here that we have this kind of two-tier Britain. We've talked about this before on Talk. People come on the show, come on the air, and they talk about two-tier Britain in terms of policing and justice. I mean, what does this... Is it fair that if you're on benefits, you are essentially told you can ignore the hosepipe ban? Is that fair? 0344 499 1000. And the thing this morning that I'm still genuinely astounded by, because I for a number of reasons. I mean, if you just put us on, firstly, thank you. Secondly, we've got Lord Richard Hermer. He is the legal advisor to the government, all right? It's a chunky old position. He is the Attorney General. And he's put something on his Instagram feed where he is, I keep using the word mocking. It's the only word I think is suitable to use. He's mocking people who want to leave the ECHR. If you switch this on this morning for the first time, you're going to hear what he said. And also, if you're watching us streaming, you can see the video as well. This is Lord Richard Hermer.
Attorney General, if the pen lands in the pot, we leave the ECHR.
Really? All right. Oops. So, 3 reasons I'm really glad I missed. Firstly, I believe that government protects people's rights. It doesn't take them away from them. Secondly, the rights in the ECHR are our rights. They're fundamental rights. They're your and our human rights. And thirdly, you know what? I think the world's a better place when we come together with 45 other nations across the Europe, united in our shared values.
I mean, this isn't just some student politician in their bedsit doing a little video to try and get hits. This is the Attorney General. And I think, well, there is a sizable amount of opinion in the country today, I made this point in the last hour, which is we need to not only have the debate about quitting the ECHR, we need to quit. We need to quit because it's been abused by lawyer activists over the years, which makes it very hard to deport people who shouldn't be in this country. I think it's Article 3 and Article 8, one of which is a right to a human life, and the other is about the right to not be tortured if you get taken somewhere that has less human rights, which is why we can't deport a lot of people. Just go through the archives and look at the number of cases where we've not been able to get people out of this country because of Article 3 and Article 8 of the ECHR. That is the Attorney General who's making it so clear that you, certainly me and others who think we should be out of the ECHR, where it's some kind of imbecile. So I just want your reaction to it, because he's a very senior man in this country's hierarchy. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a view on this and loads of other stuff as well with Peter Bleksley, former Met Police detective, who joins us this morning. Morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Good to talk to you as always. You will have seen and just heard this Hermer clip. What's your reaction to that?
It's condescending. He's trying to belittle us. And it's a prime example of why so many millions of people in this once great nation detest the establishment, their prominent figures, and by natural extension, politicians.
Yeah, I think it is. It's condescending, it's patronising. I think it's almost borderline contemptuous, isn't it, of someone else who might have a different view to him.
Yes, indeed. And you only have to look at Hermer's career and what he's done, both as a human rights lawyer and in the role of Attorney General, and to see what kind of person he is. First of all, he's Starmer's big pal, and he is one of those people who I'm sure would describe himself as progressive, what I would call one of those woke, liberal, fluffy, hugely damaging type of people that actually put the rights of people who have entered the country illegally, who are here to be a huge financial drain on this country and of no significant benefit in any way whatsoever. He puts the rights of those kind of people above you, me, and all of your audience. That's what he is. That's the kind of person that he is. His track record absolutely proves what I've just said, and I have absolutely nothing but contempt for the repugnant little man.
I'm just struck that we live in today's world where we have someone who's so senior in this country's hierarchy, someone who's massively influential, someone who's a massive part of government, who actually thinks not just the content but the style of that video is something that's acceptable to stick on his Instagram feed. It's embarrassing. I find myself thinking other countries around the world might look at that and just go, what the hell has happened to once Great Britain?
Well, it's a pathetic attempt by the most senior legal person in the country to try and get hip and down with the kids. But of course, what it actually does is scores a huge own goal, because his contemptuous kind of attitude towards us just seeps through every pore of that man's skin. He is of the elites. He is an elitist. He sneers down his nose at us and does a pathetic thing like that. If he was a TikTok personality or somebody like that, where people make a living out of doing increasingly ridiculous things, I would, of course, have a rather different approach to it. But it's the Attorney General. And in my opinion, I have absolutely no qualms about saying, with his human rights, and I put that in inverted commas, record, with his track record of being Attorney General, whereby he has been a party to protecting the rights of people who simply should not be anywhere in this nation, I find him an enemy of mine, if not the broader people.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. It's 10 minutes past 11. I'm Duncan Barks. I'm talking with Peter Bleksley, former Met Police detective. Peter, let's turn our attention to the ongoing investigation into the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. I want our viewers and listeners to be in benefit of your wealth of experience regarding this, because Devon and Cornwall Police have received quite a bit of criticism regarding how they made various announcements at the beginning of this investigation. It's not politically motivated. They don't think it's related to terror. Then at around midday yesterday, here on this show, we broke the news that it was confirmed that counter-terrorism police are now part of this investigation, if not leading this investigation. First off, I mean, the criticism of Devon and Cornwall Police, given your experience, is that justified?
I think their media strategy has, quite frankly, been appalling. It's come over terribly. Looks like they're being blown by the wind. It looks like they're really not in control of the situation. Rewind to Friday with the first in-person press announcement. The Assistant Chief Constable said, "We've got a white national in custody," and he was almost looking like the cat who'd caught the cream. But of course, that man was later released and was nothing to do with the investigation. Then we hear another announcement, a 28-year-old man is in custody, alongside announcement that it's not politically motivated, it's nothing to do with terrorism, and so on. And then, of course, they have to do a complete about-face when counter-terrorism take over the investigation. Now, I do understand, and I do have experience of investigations that can take you in an unforeseen direction, sometimes quite suddenly. But if you are having a media strategy and getting in front of the media and the people, put somebody out there that's got the intellectual dexterity that they can handle questions, stick to facts as they are known, and not look like you are blown by whatever direction the wind is puffing, and consequently you damage trust and confidence that the public have in you.
And given your wealth of experience as a former Met Police detective, just be kind enough to walk our listeners and viewers through this particular part of the investigation and what the investigation will be trying to establish at this precise moment in time, because we know that the man who was the suspect was rearrested yesterday. So is that another 36 hours worth of questioning? Is that how it works?
No, because he was rearrested in connection with acts of terrorism.
Of course.
So that completely changes the detention landscape.
Right.
He can, as of yesterday, quite easily be detained for 14 days.
Yes.
Which really changes the whole dynamic in terms of the ticking clock. Detectives are always concerned in usual circumstances about that ticking clock, and it can tick very loudly in your head as you feel you are under pressure to either gather the evidence, go to the CPS, ask for permission to charge before that clock expires. But it's a very, very different picture now. So as of today, they've got another 13 days where they can quite easily detain him with an element of some judicial oversight, which is right. And so it changes the dynamic. It says to me that there's an awful lot more work that this investigation has to carry out, hence they want the additional time. They will, of course, as and when, or if I should say, compelling evidence is gathered that a charge can be brought. It is only right that a charge is brought as soon as possible. They can't gratuitously say to themselves, well, we've got 13 days. If we've done it in 2 or 3, we'll take another 10. Those kind of rules do not apply. But yes, it changes the dynamic. It changes it completely. The resources they have, well, but they'll get anything they want. And of course, counter-terrorism policing has a network the length and breadth of the country who are very, very used to working alongside and with one another. So we'll have to see how this pans out.
Well, thank you for that clarity and thank you for that context. I mean, we do know so far, because it's appeared in the media inside the last several hours, that the suspect had communist literature at his home. Given that we know this, where do you think that will be leading the investigation now?
I'm not going to speculate on that at all because it's a media report. So what I would say is the police will go in the direction that the evidence takes them. They'll be looking at every point to try and paint a very, very broad picture as to the background of anybody that is arrested, perhaps any motives, but at the same time, they'll also be waiting for the results of forensic examinations. We know that forensic officers were at Anne Widdecombe's house for at least 2 days, if not longer. I suspect a considerable amount of exhibits and items will have been submitted for forensic examination. Of course, modern crime scenes so often give up their secrets if, and it's a big if, they've been properly preserved and properly managed. So there'll be a lot of moving parts to this investigation, but I suspect that we'll be hearing again from the police in the not too distant future.
And Peter, one of the issues that we're chewing over this morning here on Talk is what more could or should be done to protect our politicians following the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. Reform UK this morning have accused the Labour government of playing politics with Nigel Farage's life. This is Robert Jenrick, who's the party's Treasury spokesman, claiming that ministers chose not to give Mr Farage the security he needed before Anne Widdecombe's death last week because they disagreed with his politics. Mr Farage was offered a meeting with the government security authorities yesterday afternoon to discuss his safety after the alleged killing of Miss Widdecombe, the former Tory minister who later joined Reform UK. I think where we find ourselves when we read the reports about Anne Widdecombe, and once again, when we look back over the past at the murder of Sir David Amos MP, Joe Cox as well, Labour MP, we have to have the conversation about MP security. What's your current take on this? Do we need to start taking this seriously?
Well, I very much was listening to what you said at the top of the hour on your show about people saying we all need security. Well, of course, politicians require a level of security, but I'm afraid it's a very unfortunate fact that in recent decades, the police have abandoned the practice of patrolling the streets. Yep. The police now is a 999 response social service, very similar to how you get a response from the RAC or the AA when your car breaks down. Now you get a response from the police when there's societal breakdown. So abandoning the streets, abandoning patrol because the police senior leaders were hoodwinked by their academic buddies into saying it wasn't cost effective and you couldn't measure the effectiveness of it all, has meant that our streets have been taken over, of course, by the criminals. Give them a space, they'll occupy it. So we have an epidemic of shoplifting, we have an epidemic of knife crime, and much, much more. Ask any unfortunate woman who's been harassed or suffered even worse on the streets of London or elsewhere in the UK. So as a consequence, there is a responsibility, unfortunately, upon us all now to protect ourselves, both politicians and the public. We must protect our homes. We have to perhaps sacrifice that holiday to pay for a CCTV and alarm system. We need to protect our cars with steering locks, immobilisers, a post in our driveway if we have it. When we go out onto the streets, we really shouldn't use our headphones. We need to be able to hear what might be coming. We shouldn't have our heads buried in our phones. We should be looking around for any signs of potential danger. And that, I'm afraid, is where we are, sadly, in Britain in 2026. There is an obligation on both politicians and the public to keep themselves safe. But yes, this debate about public personalities, both in politics and elsewhere, is very much on.
All right, Peter, always a pleasure to have you on Talk. Thank you for your time on this Tuesday morning. Peter Bleksley, former Met Police detective. I was quite struck by the final couple of sentences of what Peter was just saying, the idea that it's not just politicians who perhaps need increased security, but our law and order in this country has changed in such a way, as has policing, that we all need to take greater precautions, greater self-security. Does that chime with you? 0344 499 1000. I mean, I can sit here for the next 90 minutes and tell you about all of the shoplifting I've witnessed, and you might go, well, why does that matter? Well, if you tolerate the shoplifting and you let people get away with it, it just escalates to further crimes because there's no respect for law and order. So I'm just very interested in what Peter said there in terms of where we find ourselves as a nation with law and order. You want to pick up on that? 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your WhatsApp and your voice note messages. In a few moments' time, we're talking defence. You will have heard on the news there's been a deadly attack on tankers in the Strait of Hormuz as the US carries out strikes. We also finally got a response from our Prime Minister yesterday after the Foreign Minister in Argentina started making overtones about getting the Falkland Islands back. We'll get a response to that and many more international stories with Colonel Simon Diggins in a few moments' time here at Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barks. This is Talk, the home of common sense on a Tuesday morning. Anything you hear you want to pick up on? 0344 499 1000. What are your messages, your WhatsApps and your voice notes as well? Let's turn our attention to some international news, which matters, particularly when we talk about the latest with the conflict with Iran, because, of course, it has a knock-on effect when it comes to the price at the pumps. And I wonder whether or not, I mean, I've noticed this in the last couple of weeks, that the price for unleaded and diesel has slowly started to decrease. But when you hear about what I'm about to discuss, I'm wondering if the latest in this set of setbacks regarding peace between US and Iran might mean we pay more at the pump. Let me just update you. This is being described as day 136 of the Iran war. And overnight, the US and Iran have exchanged fire. This is after Washington launched a third consecutive night of attacks, during which it claimed coastal defense systems and missile sites had been hit. Tehran responded by targeting a US military base in Bahrain, which twice sounded missile alert sirens, and launching missiles at Jordan, which also has a US military presence. Donald Trump has been warning of further strikes. The latest wave of strikes came after Trump warned Iran would be hit hard on Tuesday, suggesting further attacks are to come. And one crew member is dead after 2 tankers were hit in the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE said 1 crew member had been killed and several others injured after 2 vessels were hit by Iranian missiles in the Strait. Tehran claimed 2 offending, that's their word, tankers had been struck after ignoring warnings and attempting to pass through a mined route. And the US blockade has been reinstated. Trump announced yesterday that the US naval blockade of Tehran's ports would be reinstated today, insisting the US would take over the strait and acting as its guardian angel. He said he would impose a 20% tax on all cargo for ships crossing. That's relevant, because depending on what the cargo is, who's going to pick up the tab for that? I suspect it might be you and me, through increased prices and costs. Let's get a view on all of this. Colonel Simon Diggins is a military and defence analyst. He joins us this morning. Hello, Colonel.
Good morning, Duncan. How are you?
Very well indeed, thank you. Would you be kind enough just to kind of give us in layman's terms the situation we find ourselves in this morning regarding what was apparently a ceasefire, but it appears we've gone backwards?
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly right. I think it's very hard to see how the ceasefire continues to exist, except otherwise nominally in name. What we've had until now is a series of attacks and counter-responses by them. But this latest round, and we're now on our third night plus of that, looks like it might be leading to something more significant towards a more total breakdown of the ceasefire. Particularly, we know that the US have now said they're going to resume the blockade of Iranian ports. So I think at the moment, the ceasefire has effectively ceased, even though nominally it's still in place.
And presumably, if there is a blockade in place, or indeed Trump charging a 20% tariff or toll to ensure some kind of safe passage for vessels, if that cargo contains oil, gas, or indeed something else that might end up on the shelves of this country, the knock-on effect will be increased prices for the general public.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, not least of which because we have so little storage in this country. Yeah. One of the challenges we've got as a country, both in terms of dealing with this current crisis, but more generally in terms of national resilience, is how little we actually hold in this country. And we don't have anything like enough stocks in place. So within only literally a matter of days, the effect on oil, produced oil coming into the country, starts to have an effect on our prices. So we are particularly vulnerable in the UK.
Let's turn our attention to the Falkland Islands. We were talking about this yesterday on the show here at Talk. I mean, I don't believe for one moment the timing of this was accidental. Obviously, we've got a big football match happening on Wednesday evening, England against Argentina. And we spent a bit of time on yesterday's show talking about why Argentina may well be rattling the sabre yet again over the Falkland Islands, if not for the simple reason that if you look at the state of our Navy today, as a result of not only this government but previous governments, if we had to reclaim the Falklands, I think we would struggle possibly to mount the kind of task force that we saw back in 1982. The reason I want to get your view on this is we have the foreign minister of Argentina, Pablo Quino, who wrote a piece in a newspaper where he talked about the UK being an occupying power on the Falklands. And it took Sir Keir Starmer, his official spokesperson, a few hours to hit back, saying the Falkland Islanders are British with a right to determine their own future. Now, I'm keen to get your view on this. Do you think there is any serious drive beyond trying to get some headlines and a bit of sabre rattling behind Argentina trying to reclaim the Falklands?
Well, I think what they've also been looking at is kind of what the history of this particular government. The government seems so toxically scared of any kind of condemnation by any kind of international court. Yeah. And we've seen that with the ICG advisory opinion only on the Chagos Islands. We've seen another ICG advisory opinion on climate change. We've seen the government making a good arrangement, but nonetheless an arrangement with Spain over Gibraltar. And so the Argentines looking to see whether they can now make a change from that. Let's be really, really clear. The Falkland Islands are British. We were the first country to claim them in 1765. Indeed, we were the first country to discover them in the 1590s and then again landed in the 1690s. So we've got a much, much longer claim than any country called the Argentine has ever had on them. We've occupied them continuously since 1833. So, I mean, really, their opinion is nonsense. But nonetheless, I think what the Argentine government are looking at is seeing where points of pressure can be accepted by this government, and they have conceded on all sorts of things. Well, any kind of court of international opinion, whether legal or otherwise, appears, and they're going to push and see what they can get.
Final story I'd like to get your thoughts on. We broke this particular announcement on yesterday morning's show. The news that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that's Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, will be banned from the UK and formally designated as a threat to national security. When we talked about this yesterday, a number of our guests and a number of our listeners and viewers just went, well, this is good news, but why has it taken so long?
Goodness knows why it's taken so long. I think the real problem is that the IRGC are subtle in the way they operate. They don't necessarily operate directly. You can't sort of pick up a phone book and identify them, whatever. They operate through various front organisations, some which have at least outwardly legitimate aims. And I think they've been scared about it. There's also been some diplomatic pressure suggesting that because the IRGC is so integrated into various parts of the Iranian government, that somehow our ability to negotiate with the Iranian government would disappear. If I may, Duncan, I think the real issue now is not just get rid of the IRGC and its front companies, but the bigger battle ahead, which the government has shown no sign whatsoever of tackling, is the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood is an Islamist political Islam organisation which is banned in the Emirates, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, strong Muslim countries, and yet they exist in this country, as do their front organisations. So I'm absolutely delighted that, at long last, we've developed the cajoles to actually get rid of the IRGC. But the next battle, the really big one, is the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, yeah, let me ask you about that. Why do you think that there has not been a ban so far? I mean, is it a lack of political will? I mean, dare I suggest it might be a fear of upsetting a significant core part of the Labour vote? What would be your take on the fact?
That's exactly it. Because, again, the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is their stated aim, is they operate subversively. So they operate through front organisations, and what they're seeking is bottom-up change of a country which they Muslims find themselves in order to introduce effectively Sharia law, and ultimately their world aim is a world caliphate. This sounds horribly sort of kind of like conspiracy.com. Read their works, read what they do. The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians have read what they've said, and do you know what? We're not having that. And these are Muslim countries. And yet we, in the West here, somehow see that we'll be immune from what they're doing. We're not. Austria, Germany and France have identified a high percentage of the mosques and Islamist organisations in their country are directly supported by the Muslim Brotherhood. Exactly the same thing applies in this country, and yet we've not tackled it.
Simon, thank you for your time. Pleasure to talk to you. That's Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst here on Talk. Guess what? Wealthy Britons are preparing to leave the country if Red Ed Miliband becomes Chancellor and launches a new tax raid on the so-called witch. Who would have thought it? We'll get a view on that from John O'Connell, Chief Executive Taxpayers Alliance, on that and a load more stuff here at Talk.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday.
Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'm Duncan Barks. This is Talk. It's the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000. You want to pick up on anything we're chewing over this morning? Of course you can. We'll get some calls on the air between now and midday. You can also WhatsApp us and voice note us. Someone who sent a voice note on the subject of Ed Miliband, the possibility that Ed Miliband, some call him Red Ed, will be our next Chancellor. I mean, he's certainly jockeying for position. This is Matt's view.
Duncan, Matt in Hove here. What is the obsession with this idiotic country that we would contemplate putting Ed Miliband as Chancellor? Somebody in charge of the economy that has never worked in financial services. It's absurd. He was a television journalist and then he became a Labour Party researcher and he was like junior minister in the Treasury. Like, why can't we just put somebody in charge that is a powerhouse in the city?
You make a very good point there, Matt, and some good questions. I'll give you a view. I'll answer it. I mean, this is the state of modern-day politics, right? We have a raft of people in the cabinet and, indeed, junior ministers who have never worked doing a proper job. And what I mean by a proper job, they've worked for, and I don't want to upset people. Actually, I don't care if I upset people, right? You know, they've not run a business. They've not run a business. You know, in some cases, Andy Burnham, our next Prime Minister, is a case in point. Andy Burnham literally went from university to being a researcher for an MP. He did some kind of like slight NGO stuff, you know, some nice little bit of gentle working for an organisation, promoting a cause. And then he became an MP and just basically escalated from there. And that's the state of modern politics, I'm afraid, which I find utterly concerning. And you talk about Ed Miliband not having any real kind of business or financial experience. Well, look at Rachel Reeves. I mean, she will say, until she changed her CV, because people found out about her LinkedIn post, wasn't entirely right, that, oh, well, I have worked at a bank. Well, yeah. I mean, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're qualified to be Chancellor, given that it appears that you were helping people opening accounts and you worked in customer services. So I just think it's an example of modern-day politics. And second to that, and I know I'm going off on one, so John O'Connell from the Taxpayers Alliance, bear with me for a second, we just don't have the calibre. We don't have the calibre of MPs in this country like we used to 20, 30 years ago. I said it yesterday on the show, I'll say it again. Sometimes you look at this government, you look at a cabinet, and it's like a really bad episode of The Apprentice. I'd say fire the lot of them. Let's talk about Ed Miliband potentially becoming our next Chancellor, because if you have a few quid, I would argue you should be concerned for all kinds of reasons. Let's get a view on this from John O'Connell, Chief Executive of the Taxpayers Alliance. Morning, John.
Morning, Duncan.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for giving up a chunk of your Tuesday morning. I mean, where do we start with the potential or even the fear that Ed Miliband may become Chancellor? Because it's very clear he's jockeying for position. I mean, you know, there's a story circulating today he might give the green light for some North Sea oil drilling, which, if that's not a pitch to be Chancellor to try and boost the economy, I don't know what is. But we should be concerned because already we're seeing stuff in the newspapers about all kinds of things like a land value tax, maybe changes to capital gains tax, possibly increasing the rates of inheritance tax. I mean, this stuff is out there for a reason. How concerned should we be that Ed Miliband could become Chancellor?
Yeah, very concerned. Look, you were mentioning, and your caller was mentioning, the lack of business experience among our current crop of politicians from all parties, you know, to be honest. And, you know, in the Treasury specifically, somebody who's never run a business in their life, doesn't know the pressure of having to pay other people, you know, what that means at the end of the month for your bottom line and all of the rest of it. That's how you get business experience. That's how you understand the pressures that politicians can put on businesses through excessive taxation, excessive regulation, and these kinds of things. And, you know, we're seeing it in all of these suggestions that are coming out now. We're looking at higher rates of capital gains tax, for instance. And I know that this one can split opinion, but look, there's a reason that capital gains tax attracts a lower rate of tax, and that's because it's money invested. And there's a risk premium there. We need people to take risk and to to put their own money where their mouth is, to invest into business and to see a return from that business. You know, if we're talking about equalizing those rates, what we're going to do is we're going to hinder investment and therefore productivity. We're going to see fewer jobs, and that's the shakeout from that. And then you're talking about things like more wealth taxes. Of course, we've seen people leaving the country over the last 2 years. We've played this tune already. You know, we're not sick of it. But no, apparently we want to do it even more. We've seen the damage that inheritance tax, extending that to family-owned business and to agricultural property, we've seen the damage that will do. We've seen the damage of frozen thresholds on inheritance tax at £325,000, which has been held for quite a long time, a few decades now. So that really should be, you know, if that threshold had kept pace with inflation or earnings, that should now be somewhere up towards $750,000. So we've seen all the damage that this stuff does. We're not addressing the main problem, which is public spending. It's far too high. We spend far too much money on welfare. We dish out far too much money to illegal immigrants. You know, we're looking at things like not just, you know, high levels of welfare. We're looking at other areas where welfare claimants are able to get help with their bills that are not available to people who go to work. You know, holiday clubs, you know, on their water and electricity bills. These are things that are not available to people who get up every morning and go to work. And they're feeling the pressure in their everyday spending, but it doesn't work the other way around. And again, politicians don't understand business, so they think they can just come back for more.
I think you're right. And before we let you go this morning, I do want to get your specific take on this idea that a hosepipe ban should not apply to those on benefits. But I just want to revisit this idea that potentially those people who have got wealth, those on, and you're absolutely right, the figures speak for themselves. Since Labour came into government, we've seen millionaires leave, we've seen entrepreneurs leave, because it's been this almost anti-business, hostile environment that's being created. This is the bit I don't understand, and I'd welcome your view on it, which is this, all right? You and I, and anyone with a brain, knows that growth comes from the private sector, right? So we need people who are entrepreneurs, businessmen and women, to actually invest and create jobs, because ultimately it benefits the economy. We have seen over the last 2 years, since July 2024, and since Labour came into office, that Rachel Reeves's measures have been anti-business, so you can argue anti-growth, and also has seen entrepreneurs and those that you might class as wealthy leave this country and go elsewhere. Despite this, it seems that we may well end up with a Chancellor who believes still that the right thing to do is to tax the wealthy. Why haven't they learned from the last 2 years, do you think?
For the reasons I think that you covered quite eloquently in your assessment of what your caller was saying, that they don't have any business experience. So they think that these are pots of cash that you can just keep coming back for. They don't understand the blood, the sweat, the tears that goes into creating this money, to creating the jobs that, you know, everybody else in the private sector has to work in. You know, they're insulated from all of this. MPs have their energy bills paid for them. They have their council tax bills paid for them. You know, they have the most generous pension scheme you could possibly dream of. You know, they are completely insulated from economic reality. So therefore, that they think that they can just come back to the private sector and, you know, I was going to say ask for money. They're not asking for it. They're taking it from you under the threat of prison. They think they can keep coming back for more and more because they've never, ever experienced any of this in their careers, or for a large part. So that, you know, they just don't have any sense of how wealth and prosperity are created. And of course, that means people would say, well, you know what, if I'm not getting anything from this, I might have to look elsewhere, you know, be it America or wherever else, in order to raise my family and deliver them a better standard of living than I had for myself as a parent.
All right, John, stay where you are. I'm just going to bring in a caller. This is Pat in London. Hello, Pat.
Hello there. Yeah, the thing is, me personally, I've never run a business. I've got no experience, basically. But I understand the basic principles of buying and selling and doing business. I understand that. Yeah. And the thing is, what you have to look at is the left-wing socialist/communist ideology is that you take from the public sector, the private sector, and feed the public. So that is basically their modus operandi. operandi, basically. I don't think you have to be covert. You have to run a business. I think you have to understand economics and that sort of thing to know what to know that if you keep taxing, then you're not going to get anywhere.
No.
You have to let business flourish.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I think even my dog knows that if you carry on taxing people, those that you keep taxing will eventually disappear off elsewhere. Pat, a great observation. Thank you for your call. John O'Connell from the Taxpayers Alliance, before we let you go this morning, what's your take on this story? The benefit claimants have been given permission to ignore hosepipe bans. These are customers of Southern Water and Affinity Water, and the ban's been in place since Friday. It turns out that those under the water shore tariff will have an exemption from the hosepipe ban. I mean, we've been chewing over this morning whether or not this simply just creates another two-tier system in the United Kingdom. What's your take?
Exactly that. People who are in receipt of welfare have help with bills across the board. An excellent report by a think tank called Onward looked into this and found that there's a hidden sort of 10 billion additional welfare bill that's not really coming out of taxpayers' pockets per se, but it's all in benefits elsewhere in the system for people in receipt of welfare. So for example, school holiday clubs, and things like that. And healthy food cards, which are invariably not used for healthy food, I might add, and help for water and energy. So again, it's this one section of society, MPs and people in receipt of welfare and people working in the public sector, being completely insulated from the real decisions that people have to make every single day with families and households. Can I afford this? Can I afford that holiday club? Can I afford, to do that extra bit of food shopping this week? All the decisions that we have to make, others are simply insulated from them. And this hosepipe ban is a particularly egregious one. When people just want to relax in their gardens and water their plants and stuff like that, they're told no. And as good citizens, quite often you'd adhere to it and just say, right, okay, we're going to have to stick it out with the watering can for a while. But all the while, next door neighbours who are in receipt of welfare can crack on with a hosepipe. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we really need to, this isn't just about, fixing welfare and bringing down the bill a little bit. There's a real root and branch reform of how we structure all of this and how we view taxpayers and tax producing businesses in this country. There's a weird sort of cultural sickness going on, and it needs to be fixed quite drastically, because we'll run out of roads soon and we'll end up in a fiscal crisis. And lo and behold, guess what? Ed Miliband drives us into a fiscal crisis. Wouldn't be a surprise, would it? No, it does feel like we're heading that way. John O'Connell, as always, thank you for your time. John O'Connell, Chief Executive of the Taxpayers Alliance. Let's take a voice note on this hosepipe ban exemption for those on benefits. This is Graham.
Yes, they should be banned from the water thing, just like everybody else. I mean, most of these people on benefits are better off than us 6 o'clock Britons. So, yes, they should be banned from using hosepipe and everything as well.
Keep your messages coming in regarding this. I mean, is it just John and I who just think this is another example of a two-tier society? It's not about having to go at people on benefits. But if you say there's a hosepipe ban, surely that hosepipe ban has to be right across the board, because as it stands at the moment, as a Southern Water customer, that's me, if I was to use my hosepipe, I could get fined £1,000. Someone who has the exemption because they're a benefit claimant wouldn't have that fine hanging over their head. If that's not an example of two-tier Britain, I don't know what is. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 minutes to midday, I'm Duncan Barks. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000 for your calls, your voice notes and your WhatsApp messages. What more can be done to protect our politicians? Keen to get your thoughts on that. Also, have we heard anything from Richard Hermer's office at all, the Attorney General? We've not crossed the line here by playing out his pathetic Instagram video where he behaves like a 17-year-old student activist. That might get a reaction, mightn't it? Your reaction to Hermer's Insta video mocking leaving the ECHR. We might play it out one more time in the next hour. And also this bizarre situation where if you're a benefit claimant, you don't have to adhere to the hosepipe ban. Let's get some calls on the air. This is Brian in Hertfordshire. Hello, Brian.
Oh, hi there. Won't keep you long. I just have a thought about Anne Widdecombe thing, that if you put it into perspective, if she had had a friend like Nigel Farage had a friend who donated to her, had to have a bodyguard, she'd probably still be alive, you know. And I can't see why Nigel Farage just doesn't give them a bill for the bodyguard. Why should you wait a year? I mean, everyone's got bodyguards. Mick Jagger, anyone famous. But I just feel that she could.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I get the essence of your point. I don't think everyone famous has bodyguards.
You don't see them.
No. I mean, you know, someone who's an actor in Coronation Street probably doesn't have a bodyguard, but they're quite famous as well, aren't they? So let's bring it into the realms of the political world, because you make a point about if Anne Widdecombe had a bodyguard, we might not be having this conversation this morning here on Talk. Where does this lead you in terms of ensuring proper security for our politicians and MPs? I mean, surely now we need to have this debate that all MPs, regardless of their political affiliation, need better security.
Of course, I definitely agree. I mean, they're up there, and there's nutty people out there who don't agree with them and will do something dangerous, you know, to put their point across. And I just think all of them. I don't care whether they're Conservative, Labour, you know, and especially Nigel Farage is probably one of the most hated men in Britain by a certain crowd, you know.
Well, a certain cohort maybe, and I mean, you know, we know there have been people who've tried to attack him. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Oh, well, someone threw a milkshake at him. What's the big deal? Well, it matters, because that could not have been a milkshake. That could have been something else. And if we tolerate that kind of behaviour, then heaven knows what might happen next. And it does seem to be that the people on the left of the political spectrum seem more disposed towards violence than maybe people on the right. It's extraordinary that they just can't bear people who have got views that differ to theirs. Brian, it says here you're a new caller in Hertfordshire, so thank you for sharing your first time with me here at Talk. This one's in North Yorkshire. It's Peter. Hello, Peter.
Hello there, Duncan. How are you doing?
Very well indeed, sir. What would you like to say?
Again, thank you for your balance and your programme and everything that Talk do. God bless Anne Widdecombe, an absolute stalwart, and it's a disgrace, and let's just hope the Devon and Cornwall police have got the wherewithal to sort it out. Bear in mind, they're the ones that presided over the fiasco with Bob Villan, a much different set of circumstances, but they had the cowardice and wouldn't actually do what the right thing was with that. And of course, we have Lucy Conley, who did probably have a lesser audience for her tweets, and of course we know what happened to Lucy. My point really is about Hermer and Starmer, and despicable, absolutely despicable, a disgrace, the pair of them. Of course, human rights lawyers, so of course they support ECHR, because ECHR provides a bottomless pit of clients for them going forward, which they can, as we know, charge £450 an hour. And, of course, you know, the ECHR was set up by Winston Churchill, who was involved in that after the war, and it is totally not fit.
Well, it was the Council of Europe, wasn't it, that Churchill was part of around 1950, 1951. You're absolutely right to make that point. And I think most people, Peter, are of the view, and they should be, that human rights do matter. But the problem that you've just identified with the ECHR is that it's been abused over the years. And you look at Article 3, Article 8, it's, you know, they're being weaponised.
It's a monopoly free ticket for your human rights lawyers to fall back on. I got 30 years experience in law and order, spent 30 years in the police, and I saw it time and time again with unscrupulous lawyers who weren't interested in the truth, weren't interested in society and the victims. All they were worried about was getting their clients off. And time again, we saw ECHR was used. And, of course, it's now being used, in terms of the migrant situation. And something has to be done, Duncan. It has to go.
I think so. We know that Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch are saying we need to quit the ECHR. I just find myself thinking sometimes these people who abuse it and use it and weaponise it, they're not lawyers, they're activists. Pleasure to talk to you, Peter. Richard's in London. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Duncan. Yeah, 2 points. I think everybody needs to think about the horrifying crimes that we've seen over the last several years. And I think it's time for people to consider the death penalty again, because there is simply not enough deterrence. And the crimes we're seeing are just, it's like Southport or the attempted murder in Belfast. And these things are off the scale. And we can talk about increasing security as much as you like, but I mean, that's only for politicians. That's not for the public. The second point, on the human rights.
Well, let me just pick up on your death penalty point, if I may. What would you bring the death penalty back for?
It would be for the most serious acts of murder, such as those involving children, and I think murders are particularly vile, such as the murder of an elderly lady, for instance, because the point is, Duncan, we've become sort of anaesthetised to this over the years, because this is a relatively new phenomenon. If you look back in history, for instance, there was actually a fairly low murder rate in Britain between 1850 and 1950. Violent crime really increased in the sort of 50s and 60s and 70s with a primitive society, and we've just become used to it. And when the death penalty was got rid of by a Labour government, of course, there was an idea that, we'll have life imprisonment, but we don't even have life imprisonment anymore. And the other thing that we never considered was the old idea of hard labour. If you think of someone like Anne Widdecombe, who's probably watching TV now, or possibly listening to us. Now, if he thought that he'd have to do 50 or 60 years of breaking rocks in the hot sun, to quote the Crash song, I think he would have fought again. So I think hard labour is an alternative to...
Understood. Richard, I'm not being rude, but time's not on our side, but I know you wanted to make a point about the ECHR. What was it?
Very quickly, this was... It's not so much the ECHR itself, Duncan, it's the fact that when Labour passed the Human Rights Act, they sort of fused our human rights with the ECHR in such a way as it means we've got permanently open borders, because there are countries like Poland and Hungary who are signed up to the EHCR, but they don't interpret it. They see it as advisory and not mandatory. So effectively, what Hermer and Starmer and people like Sherry Blair were doing was saying we will secretly, effectively, place a bomb under Britain's legal system so that you'll never be able to control your borders.
Yeah, I mean, you make a really good point. It's about interpretation, isn't it? And I think that's something that's worthy of greater debate. Thank you, Richard in London, for calling us here at Talk. 0344 499 1000. You can do the same. You can send a voice note to that number. We'll play it out. You can also WhatsApp me, and I'll read it out as well. I'm Duncan Barks. I'm here through until 1 o'clock. Ian Collins here from 1 this afternoon. Up next after midday, former government advisor on political violence, disruption and extremism, Lord Warney on the show. Do not go anywhere. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tuesday afternoon, this is Talk, the place where the UK comes to talk. 0344 499 1000. I'm Duncan Barks in for Julia Hartley-Brewer through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Ian Collins here after 1. We'll catch up with him a little bit later on. If you've just put us on for the first time today, firstly, where the hell have you been? Secondly, thank you. And thirdly, I want to play you something from the man who is this country's Attorney General. His name is Lord Richard Hermer. He is the government's legal advisor. So he is a top man in the country. He's got an Instagram feed, and it's quite interesting. We discovered earlier today that the Attorney General had a video still up there on his Instagram feed where he's effectively mocking anyone who dares to suggest that the United Kingdom should uncouple itself from the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, I don't know how your blood pressure is, but if it's a little bit high, this might make it higher, because this man, quite frankly, is just contemptuous of anyone who thinks we'd be better off out of the ECHR. So I've just given you a warning, a blood pressure warning. Here comes our Attorney General.
Attorney General, if the pen lands in the pot, we leave the ECHR.
Really? All right. Oops. So, 3 reasons I'm really glad I missed. Firstly, I believe that government protects people's rights. It doesn't take them away from them. Secondly, the rights in the ECHR are our rights. They're fundamental rights. They're your and our human rights. And thirdly, you know what? I think the world's a better place when we come together with 45 other nations across the Europe, united in our shared values.
I still can't get my head around the fact that someone who is such a senior man in this country today thinks that's the right way of communicating with people in the United Kingdom. Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. This is Georgina in London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Duncan. Listen, I've got a few points I want to say about this stupid idiot, Richard Hermer. I mean, I watched him on his TikTok post insulting every right-leaning person in our United Kingdom. His patronising comments about his views on being part of the ECHR, making out that those on the right were fools. But Duncan, he was showing himself to be a fool for not giving the right-leaning population any credit for their intelligence, talking like being part of it was somehow beneficial to our country, somehow evolutionary going forward, when the reality is that it's the annihilation of our once great culture, our once great nation, and our once proud population, causing irreparable social destabilization for which we are paying the price daily. I mean, how can not being able to make our own political decisions and choices be beneficial to our so-called sovereign nation? How can not being able to protect our borders be safe for our British population? How can not deporting foreign criminals who rape our children, our women and our men keep our population safe? How can not be deporting foreigners who murder our family members be conducive to the cultural cohesion ideology that the left are force-feeding us continually? Lord Hermer obviously has not done his due diligence, or perhaps he doesn't care about our safety under the humanitarian and grossly outdated ECHR rules. The United Kingdom, Duncan, will continue to decay until we are free from the European straitjacket that is preventing us from moving forward and turning our society and our cities into a third world backwater. And it's blinkered, high-rolling, champagne socialists like Hermer that are the root of this evil. And until we're able to remove the self-righteous, culture-annihilating, country and economy-destroying leftists, overlords like Hermer, this country, our people, and what's left of our economy will continue to deteriorate.
Let me ask you a quick question. And first off, Lord Hermer's not here to defend himself. I have to say that in a true and decent way. But does it concern you, given what you saw in that video, that he is the government's legal advisor?
He's not at all. He's an influencer now. That's exactly what he is, an influencer. I have no respect for the man and for what he's done to our country, Duncan. No respect at all.
All right, Georgina in London, thank you for your call. 0344 499 1000. Keen to gauge the nation's view on this. I mean, from a very basic level, despite the actual content of Herma's video, which I disagree with, I just can't get my head around that we now live in a day and age where our Attorney General thinks it's okay to stick that on his social media. It's just bizarre. And I've worked in politics, I know enough about politics. He will be surrounded by people. These people have advisors, all right? And rightly so. He will have people in his office. And you would have hoped someone would have gone, do you know what, Richard, Dickie, this is not a good move. Don't do it, because it actually really belittles your role in this country, your statue. But no one would have done that, because I guarantee you this, the people who work for him are desperate for a career in politics, and they wouldn't have wanted to upset their boss. Your reaction to that video continues, 0344 499 1000. Let's return to something else we're chewing over today on Talk, which is the security of our politicians and members of Parliament. Joining me is former government advisor on political violence, disruption and extremism, Lord Warney. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Duncan.
Thank you for your time on this Tuesday afternoon. First off, I mean, I want to get your view on something that's been said in the last several hours by Robert Jenrick, a Reform UK politician, the party's Treasury spokesman. He's accusing the Labour government of, quote, playing politics with Nigel Farage's life. He claimed that ministers chose not to give Mr Farage the security he needed before Anne Widdecombe's death last week because they disagreed with his politics. We're having an overarching conversation here on Talk on this particular show about security for MPs and politicians. Is Robert Jenrick right to call out Labour over security for Nigel Farage?
I don't think that's right. What I heard Robert Jenrick say was asking that question, which I'm not sure is a wise question to ask. There's clearly an issue here, and I think we're in really unusual times where you've got a political party reform which has been leading in the polls for a long time now, looking like it could form the next government, yet only has a handful of MPs, and therefore the vast majority of Reform people don't have the level of protection that other MPs would naturally have. And of course, there's a particular issue with Nigel Farage himself, who has undoubtedly been targeted on numerous occasions by people seeking to do him harm. But I don't think it's true. I can't imagine it's true, and I certainly don't think it's helpful to suggest that this is the Labour government trying to do him in, because these calls on what level of protection MPs get are almost entirely taken out of the hands of politicians, and there is a good reason for that. And I heard Robert this morning saying, well, the Home Secretary could have intervened in this exceptional circumstance, but the danger is that if you start overruling the advice from the security professionals, that opens you up itself into, you don't want this system to be politicised. So in fact, what I think the ministers seem to have done is to stand back from the process, as is usually the case. I want to see this fixed. It is, and I think it is worth us having a proper understanding of what it is that Nigel Farage was offered, what it was that he thought that he needed on top of that. And generally, I'm of the view that parliamentarians they're generally the best judges of what they need. But look, I mean, the idea that this is a Labour plot to get him, I think is kind of feeding into this conspiracy theory stuff, which I don't think anyone is ultimately served by.
So do you think it's a case then of Robert Jenrick who's playing politics here?
I don't want to accuse Robert of doing that. This is a really serious and emotive issue. I understand why, you know, the Reform Party have just lost one of their senior and most beloved members.
Yep.
They will be feeling that really. They will be feeling really raw about that. I understand it, and I think a lot of things can be said in this kind of time, that sometimes it's better just to take a step back from rather than immediately reacting to. But the key thing is, do we give members of the Reform Party and all parliamentarians the level of protection which they need? And there'll be some people who say, well, you know, they don't care about us, so why should we care about them? Now, I think parliamentarians do actually care about the public, but why this is of wider importance is because we are lucky to live in a democracy. People are frustrated with it, but all of the alternatives where you know, a small clique of people without any accountability decide, or it's run by one ruler with no one, the public, having a say, all of those alternatives are worse. But our democracy only works if actually you can have people putting forward ideas or representing things and being, you know, very vehemently opposed through words of argument, but not implicitly threatened by force, which is what is happening if people feel fear for their safety or even fear for their life if they take particular particular views.
Well, let me ask you about that. You're a former government advisor on political violence, disruption and extremism. I was saying earlier in the show that, sadly, you go back a few years, we had the murder of Joe Cox, Labour MP in 2016, Sir David Amess, a Conservative MP in 2021. We find ourselves today talking about the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe. Do you believe we're living in more politically violent, extreme times?
Yes, I think we are, and you've had the slightly longer view over a period of 10 years or so, and 5 years before my friend Joe Cox was murdered, you had Stephen Timms, who remains an MP, who was stabbed in his London surgery by an extremist. The threat is clearly real, and what MPs will say is that the level of intimidation that they have received for so many of them has increased very significantly since the start of the Gaza conflict. And much of this focused around what position they take on the issue of the conflict in the Middle East, whether they are in favor of Palestine, as a pro-Palestine campaigners will frame it. And there was the alarming moment what we were about 18 months ago, where it was at the point where people were pushing the government to be calling for a ceasefire in the conflict. I mean, the idea that that would have stopped the conflict was fanciful anyway, but they were doing that. There was a lot of pressure, and there was a big an angry demonstration surrounding Parliament. And the Speaker looked at that and thought there was actually a risk to MPs who were going to be leaving the debate. So he didn't call a vote that he would otherwise done. And people took a step back and thought, hang on a minute, this is actually the threat of violence tangibly changing the way that we make decisions.
So we can say, forgive me for interrupting you, that if you like, the baying mob has already started to impact on democracy in this country.
Yeah, and I think we need to be much clearer in the line that we have between what is legitimate protest and freedom of speech and what is intimidation, because this intimidating behavior, if you are surrounding people or surrounding premises and you're screaming at people as they go past, it's the kind of behavior that in any other circumstance would land you with a charge of intimidation or harassment. And it's not okay. It's not a legitimate way to make your point, and it has a real tangible effect upon the way in which we can make decisions in the country, which we ultimately, however frustrated people are with the parliamentary system, we all lose out from if we go down that road.
Understood. So given everything you've just said, which has been genuinely fascinating, so thank you for your time this afternoon, what does it lead you to conclude when we talk about potentially greater security for politicians or MPs in this country? Do we need to really increase funding and resources to stop maybe some MPs or politicians feeling intimidated?
Yeah, there has been a lot of money, a lot of resource put into the system, which is welcome. Clearly, there are areas where it's going to need to go further from here. I want the area, as we're just talking about, the area directly outside Parliament is a real vulnerability, because there are many workspaces. You know, I'm talking to you from one of them right now, which is off the parliamentary estate, where there is an open passage where parliamentarians do get targeted. So we need to do all of that. But then I think the bigger thing is being clearer about what is acceptable and what isn't when you're trying to make your point in political debate.
I think you're right. Lord Warney, thank you for your time this afternoon. That's Lord Warney, former government advisor on political violence, disruption and extremism here on Talk. You may well have a view on what he said. I'd love to hear it. 0344 499 1000. Surely the time has come to increase the resources and funding when it comes to protecting our politicians and MPs. Lord Warney there making a point that a vote on Gaza didn't happen because basically, this is my words, not his, but it's the sentiment, the baying mob outside freaked out the Speaker of the House of Commons so much that the vote never took place. So what do we do about it? Do we stop protests outside of Parliament? Do we get rid of these people who turn up with their banners? Do we get rid of people who start harassing MPs walking down Whitehall? You will have seen the stuff on social media. 0344 499 1000. Do not go anywhere. More BBC licence fee madness. Here's one for you. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, was giving evidence to a select committee in Parliament inside the last 24 hours. One of the ideas that's been floated in order to carry on funding the BBC is that Netflix and Disney Plus subscribers could be told to pay the BBC licence fee. More on that next, here at Talk.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday. Immigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just turned 20 past midday. It's Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barks. I'm here through until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Ian Collins here from 1. Another day, another raft of stories about the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC. Are you ready for this? Let me just have a look. Customers of Amazon Prime. Oh, well, that's me. Hang on, let's make a note there. Customers of Netflix, subscribers of Netflix. That's me as well. Anyone next door? Yeah, one of you got those, your subscribers. Disney Plus. No, me neither. But definitely subscribing to Amazon Prime and Netflix. Well, here's some jolly good news for a Tuesday afternoon. We could be forced to pay the licence fee to avert the existential threat, not my words, to the BBC posed by its falling income. This is apparently a proposal from the Culture Secretary. Her name is Lisa Nandy. Now, she told a cross-party select committee inside the last 24 hours, she said they're introducing a staggered system under which those who watch shows on streaming platforms, so Amazon Prime, Disney Plus and Netflix, must pay the £180 annual charge. It's an option, as the government prepares to publish a white paper on the future of the corporation later this year. Lisa Nandy ruled out requiring the BBC to show adverts, funding it via general taxation or a corporate levy on the streamers. Ministers are seeking to ensure that it is sustainably funded for the 10 years from 2028. Let me just tell you what she said in a bit more detail, then we'll get some reaction to this from Rebecca Ryan, campaign director at the Fund the BBC. She says, we are committed to retaining the licence fee but reforming it. We ruled out a new tax on households because of the cost of living crisis. We ruled out general taxation because of the risk of political interference, and we said that there would be no levy on streamers because it would deter investment and harm the ecosystem, including the BBC. She went on to say, but there are other options that are available. One is expanding the scope to video-on-demand services and platforms. You could add a charge onto people's streaming subscriptions that would be paid by the consumer. Well, isn't that bloody marvellous? No choice from the person who just happens to subscribe to Netflix, Disney Plus or Amazon Prime. It's just bolted onto your subscription. Let's get a view on this from Rebecca Ryan, campaign director at the Fund the BBC. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Duncan, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm a bit grumpy about this. What do you make of it?
I mean, with this government, it's been going backwards and forwards on these different concepts over the last few months, as you will have seen. And previously, they were sort of talking about this, the stapling it onto the streaming suppliers there, but also then they talked about adding it to utility bills. Now, they've discounted that now because they said because of the cost of living crisis. Well, because of the cost of living crisis, do you think that people will then want to pay for it on top of Netflix and on top of Amazon? It makes absolutely no sense other than it just feels better for them. It feels better for the fact that they're already bolting huge amounts of costs for net zero onto utilities, so they better not put anything else on there. So why don't we just sort of put it onto these American corporates who are providing all of this entertainment content? What it essentially is a tax on entertainment, and they can't pretend that it's anything other than that. You know, the people who aren't paying the licence fee, aren't paying it because they don't want to fund the BBC. You know, they've stopped watching ITV, they've stopped watching Channel 4 if they're, you know, on live broadcast deliberately because they don't want to fund the BBC. But yet here we have the Culture Secretary, you know, finding new ways of taxing them for watching other content, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the BBC. The licence fee originally, as you'll know, Duncan, was around funding the broadcasting equipment that BBC had, and it was created to put anybody who had any sort of equipment that could receive broadcast had to pay, and that makes sense for the BBC as a national broadcaster. But it's now evolved to a point where it's literally just a sort of monopoly land grab on all entertainment. And it's not acceptable. And she's absolutely right that because of the cost of living crisis, people cannot afford it on utilities, but they can't afford it in this way either.
You're right. I mean, you know, full disclosure, I worked for the BBC for 6 years. I mean, it's one of the most dysfunctional organisations I've ever been part of. And obviously, Talk, we are a commercial broadcasting operation. So I'm just making those 2 points. But I think it's fair to say that people have fallen out of love with the BBC for all kinds of reasons. Maybe they find some of their reporting biased. Maybe they're just not making the quality of programmes that people really want to watch. And that seems to me to be the elephant in the room here. It's this kind of idea that times have changed. The BBC is not only the only provider available, and now you're in a landscape, you're providing a service with loads of other competitors, and it's backed up today with the BBC's annual report that's just come out. 539,000 people in the past year have stopped paying the licence fee, and to me that's simply because they don't want to pay it, they don't want the service, they don't think they get value for money, and they're exercising the choice. The elephant in the room here is the BBC is not as loved as it likes to think it is.
Absolutely, and we've seen this year on year, these kind of numbers coming through of people who have said, actually, I don't want to pay for the BBC anymore. And I've seen that you don't have to pay for the BBC if you just watch on demand or catch up, as long as it isn't BBC iPlayer. And so they've realised that there is a way of not funding the BBC. But these people who are doing this are paying for many other subscription services. As you say, they might have Netflix, they might have Amazon Prime, they might have Now TV, they might watch you know, Channel 4 or ITV on catch-up. They're allowed to do that without a TV licence. So they can do all of those things, and they're prepared to pay for them because they want to watch the content that's there. The BBC is just trying to circumvent that system and just get income regardless of the quality of content that it's making. And that's what's really unacceptable to people.
For those people who are listening and watching Talk at the moment who might have a soft spot for the BBC, how would you propose that it's funded in the future?
I think it should be funded in the way that all the other services are. They could choose to either, you know, you see now on ITV, you can either watch the adverts or you can pay a subscription if you don't want to watch adverts. You see that on Channel 4 as well, and you're seeing it even on Amazon Prime, you're seeing it on YouTube. Pay a fee if you don't want to watch adverts, or watch adverts. It's up to you. And I think the BBC should be doing exactly the same as all of its competitors.
Yeah, it should be about choice, shouldn't it? The new Director General, Matt Britton, has said off the back of the BBC's annual report being released today, he's saying that the decline in licence fee payers has contributed to the financial challenge facing the corporation. Well, I'd make the observation, Matt, that in your annual report, we have a list of some of the highest paid presenters within the BBC, including Scott Mills, who was recently dropped from the corporation. We learned that he was paid in the region of £745,000 to £750,000. Greg James in the region of 440 grand a year to 445 grand a year. Laura Koonsberg, £400,000 a year to £410,000 a year. Anyone else on this list? Vernon Kay in the region of 400 grand a year. Fiona Bruce in the region of £345,000 a year. All of these figures are in the BBC's annual report that's just been released. One has to make the observation, Rebecca, that if you're going to plead poverty, you probably need to be cutting people's wages.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, the BBC needs to be cutting back, not just on wages, but also on the huge amount of wastage, the amount of people they send to Glastonbury every year, the amount of people they have in running the newsroom. You know, they just have a huge amount of bloat at the BBC. They just spend and spend and spend. And rather than just cutting back on the odd programme here and there, they need to really seriously tighten their belts and look at the things that they're doing. They're buying in programmes from America, which is unnecessary. We don't need those programmes to be bought in by the BBC just to increase their viewing figures, because we've already watched them on Netflix or we've watched them on Amazon Prime. We don't want the BBC wasting money on that. So they're not serious about cutting back on their budgeting. They're still, you know, hell-bent on securing the TV licenses. That's what they want to do first and foremost. And that's what's so frustrating, is that, you know, we have this Labour government who are prepared to just hand them what they want on a silver plate.
I think you're right, Rebecca. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director for Defund the BBC. I want to lob this out there. If you just tell me, as someone who still pays a licence fee, do you think you get value for money for your 180 quid a year? 0344 499 1000. I've been very open here. I used to work for the BBC. Well, I could write a book about it. I really could. And I'd also make the point, as somebody who's worked in commercial broadcasting for most of my life, this show that you're listening to at the moment on Talk has how many people on it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all right? This is a national, all-talk 3 hours bit of broadcasting every weekday morning, yeah? That's a fair description, isn't it? I can tell you, having worked at a national BBC station, this show would probably have the resource of, I reckon, 14 to 15 people working on it. There's context for you. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Petri Hoskin back here, 10 o'clock tonight here on Talk. Closer to home is Ian Collins. He's here from 1 this afternoon. Between now and then, you've got me, Duncan Barks. Let's turn our attention to Shabana Mahmood, our Home Secretary, who is trying to attempt some kind of asylum crackdown. A lot of eyes are on our future Prime Minister Andy Burnham, whether or not he's prepared to back some of her measures. It appears so far that he is. What does this mean on any crackdown for people who shouldn't be in this country or waiting to be in this country? What does it mean to you as taxpayers? And does it go far enough? Someone who can answer all of those questions is Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator and former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Hello, Danny.
Good afternoon, Duncan. Nice to be with you.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Just be kind enough to walk through the proposals that Shabana Mahmood is trying to get through Parliament at the moment, and whether or not there's going to be a collision course at some point with maybe some Labour backbenchers who, as some Talk viewers and listeners might view as being slightly soft on immigration.
Are you referring to the indefinite leave to remain proposals?
Yeah, let's start with that, and then we'll get on to other parts. Yeah.
Well, Shabana Mahmood has put forward some proposals to extend the number of years that someone has to be in the country before they're entitled to settle here, given permanent residence rights, if you like. It's also called indefinite leave to remain, to use the jargon. At the moment, it's 5 years. She wants to extend it to 10 years. In some cases, it could be as much as 20 years. For an example, for an asylum seeker who comes across on a small boat but is granted refugee status, it might be up to 20 years before they can be allowed to settle here permanently. The exact details have yet to be announced because there's a consultation process going on. So the government has put forward some proposals, they're being consulted on, and we won't know for another couple of months what exactly they're proposing. But Labour is coming under pressure from backbenchers who say, well, look, this is unfair because you have people who are here already and they're expecting to be granted their settlement after 5 years. Now, if the government suddenly turns around and says, well, you're going to have to wait another 5 years or potentially even longer for that, that's very unfair, particularly on people who are making a valuable contribution to our life, perhaps working in the NHS or in care homes or prisons or schools. So there's pressure from Labour backbenchers and others on the one hand, and also you've then got criticism, I think, from the Conservatives and Reform UK saying, don't you dare water down these proposals. If you do that, that shows weakness. So I think they're going to have to find some sort of middle ground on this, and the middle ground might be, well, you get your residency rights after 5 years as normal if you're in the country already, but that won't necessarily entitle you to all the benefits that you would receive.
Yeah, and do we think that goes far enough to appease some of these Labour backbenchers?
I think it probably will. And look, don't forget, we're going to get a complete change in sort of atmosphere in the Labour Party once Andy Burnham steps through the door in Downing Street next week. There'll be a different atmosphere. There'll be a different approach. I think people will be more willing to go along with ideas and measures that he puts forward than they would have done under Keir Starmer. So I think the mood music will be very different for Labour. I think there is some room for manoeuvre for Shabana Mahmood. But, you know, I think the element that's most controversial is not for people in the future who might come to the UK, but for people who are here already and are expecting, oh, I've been here 3 years, I've only got another 2 years to wait, and then I've got my indefinite leave to remain, only to be told, oh no, you're going to have to wait another 7 years. That, I think, is where it gets really tricky.
And I think I'm right in saying the bill had its second reading in the House of Commons yesterday, and Andy Burnham voted to support what the Home Secretary wants to implement. Is that correct?
These measures are not in the immigration bill, Duncan.
Right.
This is where the confusion arises. The immigration bill at the moment is looking at a suite of other measures which are not so controversial. For example, a new immigration appeals body that can hopefully deal with asylum and immigration cases more swiftly, for example.
Understood.
That's one measure.
Yeah.
So this bill that's going through at the moment does not deal with the settlement issues. That can be dealt with at a later date and probably won't require new legislation. It the Home Secretary can put forward some changes to the rules that will then go through. So that's slightly different. So Andy Burnham voting with the immigration bill, that's not a big deal, and that's not unexpected.
Thank you for the clarity on that. And let's turn our attention to something that is often talked about here on Talk, and the frustration that many of our viewers and listeners feel when we talk about a man who's been described as the Rochdale grooming gang leader, Shabir Ahmed, and a wish by many of our viewers and listeners for him to be deported back to his home nation of Pakistan. He's refusing, or rather they're refusing to take him back, and he's also renounced his Pakistani citizenship. So where does this leave the Home Secretary?
Well, so what the Home Secretary has done is to put a new measure in the immigration bill, which is just going through Parliament, as we spoke about, which will close a loophole that would prevent the deportation of Shabir Ahmed to Pakistan. In essence, the Immigration Act from over 50 years ago said anyone from a Commonwealth country, which includes Pakistan, who arrived in Britain before 1973 and has stayed here for at least 5 years, cannot be removed, cannot be deported, even if they've committed the most vile offences, which Shabir Ahmed has. Government's going to remove that loophole, but that's only one part of the battle, because that will be passed by Parliament. I've got no doubt about that. It might take some months for it to go through. The problem is Pakistan has to agree to take Ahmed back. You cannot send someone on a plane without the receiving country being willing to accept them. Pakistan, we believe so far, has refused to do so and has refused to take other ringleaders of grooming gangs. So I think this is going to require some diplomacy between the British and the Pakistan authorities, perhaps some exchanges of other suspects, perhaps some negotiation, perhaps some carrots and sticks, in order for the Pakistanis to agree to take Shabir Ahmed back once the legislation has gone through Parliament.
Understood. So despite any legal change the government may make, we're still effectively at mercy of a country saying, yeah, we'll take back this person.
Yes, absolutely. Look, the Pakistanis were very cooperative. If you remember that dreadful case in Surrey a couple of years ago of the schoolgirl Sarah Sharif, who was murdered by her father and other members of the family involved. and they fled to Pakistan, and there was cooperation between the Pakistani authorities and law enforcement in the UK, and the relatives were extradited back to Britain to face justice, and they were convicted. So there was good cooperation then between the two countries, and there is in other spheres as well. I think this is a hurdle that can be overcome. That's my view, but it will take, quite a bit of sensitive negotiation behind the scenes for it to happen.
Danny, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you for your experience and insight as Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator and the former advisor to Yvette Cooper. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Just turned 20 to 1. I'll take a call in a sec, but first, a couple of messages coming in off the back of our chat with Rebecca Ryan from Defund the BBC. As we learned today that the number of people paying the BBC licence fee has fallen by more than 500,000. The BBC's annual report was released. It details that less and less people, or is it fewer and fewer? I get confused. Less and less, fewer, fewer. Anyway, you get my drift. People ain't paying the licence fee like they used to. About 500,000 plus are no longer paying it. We also discover in the annual report that DJ Scott Mills was the highest paid presenter at the BBC before he was sacked earlier this year. And we also discover that the Culture Secretary, a woman by the name of Lisa Nandy, told a group of MPs that subscribers to things like Netflix may well have to pay the licence fee to carry on funding the BBC. So I asked you earlier whether or not you think you get value for money from the BBC. This is Brad in Cambridge, who says the Biased Broadcasting Corporation is little more than a propaganda vehicle for the Labour Party. They used to produce very decent dramas, but these are just platforms to preach woke ideology, says Brad, who's in Cambridge. Karina says, I paid a licence fee and do not think it's good value for money. I think it is very biased in its reporting, but unfortunately I have Sky, so I have to pay for it. It is completely out of date and it pays its presenters obscene amounts of money for their biased reporting. Happy for you to carry on taking, or rather sending me messages along these lines, because I'm fascinated to find out whether or not you think there's value for money in the licence fee. And here's one from Mark, who says, look what the BBC paid Jonathan Ross, millions for the remarkable talent of being able to talk to camera. I liked Jonathan Ross, but he wasn't worth paying more than an MP. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Talking about the intimidation of politicians, politicos and MPs in this country, whether or not we need to do more to secure their safety. This is Herbie in Harrow. Hello, Herbie.
Good morning. Morning, Duncan. Nice afternoon, beg your pardon. I'm losing track of time. Duncan,
you're wishing your life away, Herb.
I don't need to do that, thank you very much. Duncan, we are living in very, very troubled times. Yep. None of us are safe any longer. If you're campaigning for a particular political party, you stand the risk of being assaulted or whatever. Yeah. And, it's not fun anymore like it used to be. It's taken the fun out of it. It really has.
Well, you're a bit of a veteran political campaigner, because this must be, hang on a second, the fourth radio station in my what I laughingly call my broadcasting career that I've spoken to you on. And you I think I'm right in saying you stood as a candidate for various political parties. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I have.
So when was it fun? Because you said it is no longer fun. When was it fun to be knocking on people's doors and saying, vote for me and I think we should do this?
Well, when I was first elected back in 1994 as a councillor for Harrow, it was fun. I said, I was door knocking and said, vote for me, got elected. I thought, oh, God, what do I do now? And this is when it was fun. I went into the council chamber with a ball and chain when it was, trying to do the budget and things like that.
Sorry, hang on. You went into the council chamber wearing a ball and chain?
Yeah.
Well, some people listening to this, Herbie, might be thinking you're not taking the job that seriously.
I was taking it very seriously because I was...
What, you started wearing fancy dress?
Oh, not fancy dress, a ball and chain. It was a real one. I'll drop it on your toe and you'll know about it. I'll tell you, it was fun. It was fun, though, Duncan. And, you had the serious things in life. And it's taken the edge out of it because you've got to watch your back all the time. I was up at Manchester campaigning, and there were some real nasty people up there. I tell you,
Well, let me ask you about this, and I'm joshing with you a little bit because you stood for office, you got elected, and fair play to you. When do you think it all changed? When did it stop being fun, and when did it start being really unpleasant, where you get some quite serious vitriol from those people who disagree with your political views? What changed? When did it change?
I think when when Tony Blair was first elected, it all started to change then, you know, with immigration and the war and everything else. It all started to go downhill very quickly because they had the majority vote. You know, they brought in the postal voting, which I never agreed with. And they
but why would, sorry to interrupt you, but why would postal voting change how people behave in politics? I don't quite get it.
Well, you don't know you don't know who's putting a cross on there to put the person in power. You really don't. You do not know who's doing it. You go to a booth, only you are allowed to go in that booth and put that cross in.
I get that. Let me give you my theory as to why it's got worse over the years, and I think it's down to social media.
Yeah, that too. That I agree. That too, because it's so easy, very quickly, instant photographs, instant reports.
Yeah, and you know, you get some keyboard warrior sitting in their bedroom who doesn't like a politician or their policy. They type out some bile, then it gets worse, then it gets worse, it never gets challenged, and consequently, people think they can behave in the most appalling way. Herbie, thank you very much for your call. It is Talk. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 1. Ian Collins here after 1. We have a report out today showing that the UK government wasted nearly 2/3 of the money it spent on protective equipment, almost 10 billion quid, and had perilous stockpiles that were unprepared for the pandemic. This is the latest finding as part of the COVID-19 inquiry. More details on this and reaction next here at Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Duncan Barks. I'm here with you through until 1. Ian Collins here after 1. We'll catch up with him shortly, find out what's on his show. So the COVID-19 inquiry continues, and one of the headlines this afternoon is that it's been found that the UK government, one report says wasted, others might say spent, nearly 2/3 of the money that it spent on protective equipment, around 10 billion quid. And they had perilous stockpiles that were unprepared for the pandemic. Now, I take a slightly pragmatic view regarding this because I think, you know, hindsight is great, isn't it? The benefit of hindsight, you might go, we would have done this differently, would have done that differently, we would have made these decisions different from the decisions we made. And I think it's fair to say, this, that the COVID-19 pandemic was so unprecedented that I think whoever was in government would have made some decisions which turn out to be not the right decisions. But that's just maybe my view. Let's get a more informed view on this. Roy Lilly is a former NHS Trust chairman, joins us on Talk. Good afternoon.
Hello, Duncan. Good afternoon.
Thank you for your time. I've just gone through one of the initial headlines here about the amount of taxpayers' money, as one report describes, wasted on PPE during the COVID-19 pandemic. Is some of this criticism justified, do you think?
Well, look, I think it's easy to be critical. I think it's worth just rolling back the tape, and having a look at what happened here. In terms of preparedness, the NHS and other departments of government used to rehearse something called Operation Signet. Now, that was fundamentally a kind of a pandemic based around a flu thing, that somebody would be able to produce a vaccination for. The exercise would be over maybe 10 days, and everybody would come out, pat each other on the back and say, yeah, well, we came through that all right, and I've kind of been through that myself.
Yeah.
But what happened with COVID was it was what's called a novel infection. That means a new infection for which all the existing stuff we had was no good. Once that was discovered, there was a panic. Now, normally procurement is done through NHS procurement services. They buy billions of stuff. I used to be the chairman of the National Standing Committee on Supplies and Purchasing all those years ago. And now they're spending about 16 to 18 billion, I think. I mean, that's a big job in itself. If you suddenly have a big scramble for one thing like PPE, particularly masks, then it wasn't robust enough to be able to do it. So the Crown Office set up their own procurement lines. As a result of that, 800 people were recruited, and within 15 weeks, they went through, I think it was 25,000 offers of procurement, offers to make stuff for the procurement. So I think the upshot of that is we were unprepared, no question about it. But, so was everywhere else. The problem was nobody could make the PPE fast enough. China was the one place that you could get it from. The Italians sent people there and bought a shed load of stuff for the Italian health service, which a lot of it was dumped afterwards. France had the same trouble. Germany is still having litigation about stuff that was bought that wasn't properly spec'd and wasn't properly used. And to be honest, you look around the world, America had big problems because they have their states buying stuff instead of central government. Canada had problems. Wherever you look, Duncan, you can say nobody handled this very well. Everybody was caught short.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a UK thing, is it? And you're right to highlight that. I mean, something else in this report I find quite interesting. The report found the government's attempt to fast-track supply chains for COVID-19 medical equipment, known as the high priority lane, was misguided. That was one of the findings, and created unfairness in emergency procurement. Some suppliers received favourable treatment because they had connections to government, the report found, but no cronyism or corruption was identified by the inquiry. Should we be concerned that some of these suppliers got favourable treatment because there was some kind of connection to government?
Yes, but again, there are reasons for this. You will know yourself that MPs have a fast track for pretty much everything. So that if you write to your MP with some problem with social care or the health service or what have you, they have a fast track into the NHS to get their questions answered. The same with social care, the same with education, constituents write. So that's how you can get an answer from your MP, because they have a fast track. So I understand why they set up a fast track for procurement, because a lot of MPs were saying, look, I've got somebody in my constituency, they're making frocks and trousers, but they can make PPE and masks. Yeah. What do I tell them? So they set up the fast track. Of course, I mean, there's evidence now that it went wrong. People took advantage of it. Crooks came in and sold stuff that either didn't exist or was inappropriate. But I understand why they relied on that fast track to do it. So it's very easy to be critical, and I think we should be. I'm not saying that we should give government a free pass, but I think it's important to put it in the international and national context.
And let me ask you this, Roy, based on your experience, and you mentioned procurement earlier, what should be the one major thing, or all the major things that should be learned regarding what we all went through as part of the pandemic in terms of procurement, making sure our nurses and doctors have the right protective equipment, making sure we have the right kit in the hospitals? What's the key thing going forward that we really need to take on board?
Preparedness. One word, preparedness. So what I would do is I would buy an excess of PPE now and build up a stockpile. Now, over time, it does decay. So I would have a rolling stock. So, let's say, for example, we needed to buy 10 masks and that was the target. I would buy 100, and I would keep rolling the 10 masks through it, so that the equipment didn't decay, it is usable, it didn't get out of date. So you build up a buffer stockpile and roll that through in your normal day-to-day procurement. That's the only way you can do it. It requires an investment to get the stockpile, but once you've got it, you take orders off the stockpile and then fill it up from the back end.
Fascinating. Roy, thanks for your experience and your thoughts. That's Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, here on Talk, commenting on the report and the COVID-19 inquiry. One of the findings that the UK government wasted nearly 2/3 of the money it spent on protective equipment, almost £10 billion, and had perilous stockpiles that were unprepared for the pandemic. As they say, hindsight is a marvellous thing. I'm almost done and dusted, but Ian Collins is here after one.
Is that, when you say you're almost done and dusted, is that a general point of where you're at in life?
It's a life comment.
Exactly.
I don't think I'm slightly dusty. I don't think I'm done yet, though.
You're definitely not done yet. Definitely not done. We've both been covering politics for a long time. Can you remember, and there's a couple of points that might crop up here, when did this toxicity around politicians where your opponent becomes an enemy, whereas previously they were just somebody who disagreed with you, but now they're a figure of hate. You don't even want them around.
No.
What was that? Where was that point? Was there a tipping point? Was it Brexit? Was it something else?
Oh, yeah, I think Brexit certainly fueled it. I mean, I still have conversations now with people who can't get there, who can't accept the Brexit referendum result. And they've had a few beers.
And the apocalyptic way that they define it is just extraordinary.
But after they've had a few beers, they become really nasty about Brexit. So I think those wounds still run deep. I think social media has a part to play in it.
Social media lobs some booster rockets on it, didn't
Definitely. And I think we have some politicians who, over the years, have used language, not necessarily in public, but have been caught using language. I refer you to Angela Rayner, Tory scum.
What was the comment that Boris Johnson made? And it wasn't really anything bad, but somebody on the left, somebody on the Labour benches said, it's exactly that kind of comment that puts me in danger. I can't remember what the comment was.
I can't remember.
It was picky. It wasn't a genuine, but Tory scum, stuff like... Because it used to be the Conservatives that got this, and then Reform popped up, and then they suddenly started to take the flak